Have you ever witnessed a mother slap her own daughter at a family wedding in front of 100 guests? No? So imagine this. You're at your sister's wedding. 200 guests. Judges, lawyers, Boston's elite, all watching. And your mother just handed you a stack of documents on stage, demanding you sign over your $2 million penthouse as a wedding gift to your sister. You say no. And her palm connects with your face so hard your earring flies across the marble floor. That was my reality. March 15th, 2024. They expected me to cry, to apologize, to surrender like I always had. Instead, I picked up my earring, walked out, and made one phone call. 1 hour later, a woman walked into that reception. When my mother saw who it was, she started screaming because the person she told everyone was senile and gone had just arrived with a lawyer and proof of everything she'd been hiding. Before I continue, please like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. Now let me take you back 3 years to where this all began. The call came on a Tuesday evening in March 2021. I was sitting in my studio apartment in Somerville, eating leftover pad thai and reviewing blueprints for a client's kitchen renovation, when my grandmother's name lit up my phone screen. "Paige, sweetheart," Eleanor Harrison said, her voice steady as it had always been. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." My grandmother had been a professor at Harvard Law School for 31 years before retiring. She didn't waste words. So when she told me she was updating her will and leaving me the penthouse at 150 Seaport Boulevard, the one she'd purchased in 2015 for $1.8 million, now valued at over $2 million, I set down my chopsticks and listened. "Why me?" I asked. Not because I didn't want it, because I genuinely didn't understand. "Because you're the only one who visits," she said simply. "Every Sunday for 10 years, Paige, while your mother sends Christmas cards and your sister sends nothing at all. You bring me tulips because you remember they're my favorite. You sit with me when I have nothing interesting to say." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Grandma, the paperwork will be finalized next month. Marcus Webb is handling everything. He's been my attorney for 20 years. She paused. "Your mother will not be pleased." That, as it turned out, was the understatement of the decade. The news leaked to my family within weeks. I still don't know how. Maybe someone at Marcus's firm mentioned it to someone who knew someone. Boston's legal community is smaller than people think. All I know is that by April 2021, my mother had organized what she called a family discussion at her $4 million home in Beacon Hill. I remember walking into that living room and seeing the way they were all seated. My father Richard in his leather armchair, my mother Victoria on the settee, my sister Madison perched on the arm of the couch like she was posing for a photograph. They'd arranged themselves like a tribunal. "Paige." My mother's voice was honey over broken glass. "We need to talk about your grandmother's condition." "Her condition?" I sat down on the only empty seat, a straight-back chair that faced all three of them. "She seems fine to me." "She's clearly not thinking straight." Victoria crossed her legs, her Cartier bracelet catching the light. "Leaving a $2 million property to one grandchild? Excluding everyone else? That's not the behavior of a rational woman." "She's not excluding anyone," I said. "She's giving me something she wants me to have. That's her right." Madison let out a small, theatrical sob. "This is so unfair. I've always loved Grandma. I just don't have time to visit like you do. I have a career. I have a life." "You have a trust fund and a fiancé with a yacht," I thought, but didn't say. "The fair thing to do," my father spoke for the first time, his voice measured in that way attorneys cultivate, "would be for you to decline the inheritance, or at least agree to sell the property and split the proceeds equally among family members." I stared at him, Richard Harrison, who hadn't asked me a single question about my life in years. Richard Harrison, who'd missed my college graduation because of a scheduling conflict that turned out to be a golf tournament. That Richard Harrison was now telling me what would be fair. "I'm not declining anything," I said, "and I'm not selling anything." Grandma made this decision because she wanted to. If you have a problem with it, talk to her. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victoria's smile vanished. Then I hope you're prepared, she said, for the consequences of being so selfish. The consequences came swiftly. By summer 2021, I had been quietly removed from the family text chain. I learned about Madison's engagement party through an Instagram post, a photo of her surrounded by our cousins, champagne glasses raised, at a venue I recognized as the Boston Harbor Hotel. The caption read, "Future Mrs. Caldwell," with 3 diamond emojis. No one had told me. No one had invited me. When I asked my mother about it, she said, "Oh, we assumed you wouldn't want to come. You've been so busy with your little decorating business." My little decorating business was a licensed interior design studio with 12 active clients and revenue that had doubled in the past year. But to Victoria Harrison, anything that wasn't a law degree or a wealthy husband was just a hobby. The worst part wasn't the exclusion, it was what came with it. The stories Victoria began telling anyone who would listen. Paige manipulated my mother, I overheard her say at a neighborhood gathering I'd shown up to uninvited. Visited her constantly, turned her against the family. You know how vulnerable elderly people can be. She painted me as a predator, a schemer, the ungrateful daughter who'd exploited a confused old woman for profit. And through all of it, I never once corrected her publicly. I never made a scene. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I just kept my head down, eventually the storm would pass. I didn't understand yet that silence was exactly what she was counting on. What I also didn't understand was why Grandma Eleanor had moved into Brookhaven Senior Living in late 2021, a luxury facility in Wellesley that cost $12,000 a month. She told me she wanted peace and quiet. She told me she was tired of the drama. But sometimes when I visited her on Sundays, I caught something in her eyes, a flicker of something that looked almost like fear. "Grandma," I asked once, "did something happen? Between you and Mom?" She looked out the window at the manicured gardens for a long moment. "Some things are better left alone," she finally said. "At least for now." I let it go. I shouldn't have. 3 years would pass before I understood what she was hiding, and why she'd chosen to hide it. December 2023. 3 months before the wedding that would change everything. I was in my studio on a Friday afternoon, reviewing fabric samples for a Brookline townhouse project, when the mail arrived. Among the invoices and catalogs was an envelope of heavy cream cardstock, my name written in calligraphy so elaborate, it took me a moment to decipher it. Inside was an invitation. Madison's wedding, March 15th, 2024. The Fairmont Copley Plaza. Black tie. For a full minute, I just stared at it. After 2 years of being treated like a ghost, no holidays, no birthdays, no casual texts, they were inviting me to the wedding? My phone rang that same evening. "Mother." "Paige, darling." Victoria's voice was warm, almost affectionate. I hadn't heard that tone since before the inheritance news broke. "Did you receive Madison's invitation?" "I did." "Wonderful. You know, this wedding is going to be such a beautiful opportunity for our family to heal, to move forward." She paused meaningfully. "To show everyone that the Harrisons are united." I waited. "I've been thinking," she continued, and there it was, the real reason for the call. This would be the perfect time to revisit our conversation about the penthouse. Madison and Tyler will need a place to live after the honeymoon, somewhere appropriate for a young couple starting their life together. I closed my eyes. Of course, the invitation wasn't an olive branch, it was bait. "Mom, the penthouse is mine. Grandma left it to me. That hasn't changed." "Nothing has to change, sweetheart. You could simply transfer the property as a wedding gift. Think of how generous that would look. Think of how proud Grandma would be to see you supporting your sister." The audacity of it took my breath away. Using my grandmother, the woman who had specifically chosen to give me that apartment, as an argument for why I should give it away. "I'm not transferring anything." "Paige." The warmth evaporated. Madison deserves a proper start. She's marrying into the Caldwell family. Do you understand what that means? Tyler's father is a managing partner at Ropes and Gray. They'll be entertaining. They'll be hosting. They need a home that reflects their status. Then Tyler's father can buy them one. Silence stretched between us. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was ice. I expect you to think carefully about this before the wedding, and I expect you to make the right choice. She hung up. I sat in my studio as the winter sun set, casting long shadows across my drafting table. I understood exactly what was at stake now. If I went to that wedding and refused again, in front of everyone Victoria had spent decades cultivating relationships with, she would make me pay. She would tell every guest that I was the selfish, ungrateful daughter who'd ruined her sister's special day. She would weaponize the entire Boston legal establishment against me. My reputation, my business, my future client referrals, so many of which came from word of mouth in exactly those circles. But if I didn't go, that would be its own kind of surrender, proof that I was too ashamed to show my face, proof that I had something to hide. I considered skipping it. I really did. But something in me refused. I had done nothing wrong. I had accepted a gift from someone who loved me. I would not be made to feel like a criminal for it. I RSVP'd yes. 1 week before the wedding, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Grandma Eleanor. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice carrying that particular urgency I'd only heard a handful of times in my life. "I need you to listen carefully." "I'm listening. If something happens at that wedding, and I believe something will, I want you to call Marcus Webb immediately. The number is 617-555-0142. Can you write that down?" I grabbed a pen. "Grandma, what are you talking about? What's going to happen?" "Your mother thinks I don't know what she's planning. She forgets that I was practicing law before she was born." Eleanor's voice was steady, but I heard the steel beneath it. "I've prepared everything, Paige. Marcus has all the documents. If you need them, they're ready." "Documents? What documents?" "Just remember the number. And remember," she paused, "that I love you. Whatever happens, I love you." She hung up before I could ask anything more. I saved Marcus Webb's number in my phone, not understanding why my hands were shaking. I wouldn't understand until I walked through the doors of the Fairmont Copley Plaza and saw what was waiting for me. March 15th, 2024, 5:00 p.m. The Fairmont Copley Plaza rose above Copley Square like a monument to old money and older traditions. I'd driven past it hundreds of times in my life, but walking through those gilded doors as a guest, as a Harrison, felt different. It felt like walking into enemy territory. The ballroom was breathtaking. White orchids cascaded from crystal chandeliers. A 12-piece jazz ensemble played Gershwin in the corner. Waiters in black ties circulated with champagne flutes and canapes on silver trays. Every detail screamed expense, taste, and Victoria Harrison's personal touch. 127 guests. I'd counted the chairs during cocktail hour. Lawyers, doctors, investment bankers, old Boston families whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. These were the people my mother had spent 3 decades impressing. Her audience, her witnesses. I wore a navy blue dress, elegant but not attention-seeking. I had debated for hours about what to wear, knowing that anything too expensive would be called showing off the penthouse money, and anything too simple would be embarrassing the family. In the end, I chose something that simply felt like me. Richard found me near the ice sculpture. A swan, naturally, 10 minutes after I arrived. "Paige?" My father nodded, his eyes sliding past me like I was a piece of furniture he was trying not to bump into. "Glad you could make it." "Dad." We stood in silence. After 32 years, we had nothing to say to each other. Madison appeared in a cloud of white tulle and Swarovski crystals, her veil trailing behind her like a promise of the life she'd always believed she deserved. She hugged me, arms circling but not quite touching, the way you'd embrace a stranger at a networking event. Paige, you came. Her smile was camera ready. Perfect teeth, perfect makeup, perfect performance. Of course I came. You're my sister. She pulled back, and her expression shifted. Subtle, calculating. Did you bring the paperwork? I blinked. What paperwork? Mom said you'd have the transfer documents ready by today. Madison's voice was light, almost playful, but her eyes were hard. For the penthouse, our wedding gift. So this was it. They'd already decided among themselves that I would comply. The invitation, the phone call, the reconciliation theater, all of it was just a prelude to this moment. Madison, there are no transfer documents. What do you mean? I mean the penthouse is mine. It's not a gift. It's not up for discussion. Her perfect smile flickered. But Mom said, I don't know what Mom told you. I kept my voice low, steady. But I'm not signing anything. Not today. Not ever. Madison's jaw tightened. For a moment, she looked exactly like Victoria, the same flash of fury barely contained. You know, Tyler and I were planning to move in after the honeymoon. We already told the realtor we wouldn't need the condo in Back Bay. We already told everyone. You told everyone about an apartment that doesn't belong to you. It should belong to us. Her voice rose slightly. You don't even need it. You live in that little place in Somerville. You don't entertain. You don't have anyone to impress. What's the point of you having a $2 million penthouse? The point. What was the point of me having anything nice, anything valuable, anything that suggested I might matter as much as she did? I'd spent my whole life being asked that question in different ways. The point, I said quietly, is that Grandma wanted me to have it, and her wishes matter more than your real estate plans. Madison stared at me. Then she leaned in close, her bridal perfume overwhelming. Mom's going to handle this, she whispered. And when she does, don't say I didn't warn you. She swept away toward a group of bridesmaids, leaving me standing alone by the melting swan. I moved toward the bar, needing something to steady my nerves. But before I could order, a woman in a cream Chanel suit stepped into my path. I recognized her, Patricia Holloway, one of Victoria's tennis partners and the wife of a federal judge. You're Paige, aren't you? Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Victoria's mentioned you. I bet she has. I heard you're holding on to some property for your grandmother, Patricia continued. That's very responsible of you. Will you be selling it soon? There it was, the narrative Victoria had been spinning. I wasn't the heir. I was the caretaker, the temporary custodian of assets that would eventually be distributed properly. Actually, I said, I live there. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Oh, I thought, well, never mind what I thought. She excused herself quickly, disappearing into the crowd. I stood alone in that sea of silk and judgment, understanding finally what I was up against. Victoria had been preparing this battlefield for years. Every conversation, every social event, every carefully placed comment, all of it was groundwork. And tonight, she intended to collect. I just didn't know yet how far she was willing to go. I escaped to the balcony. The March air was cold enough to bite, but after the suffocating warmth of the ballroom, I welcomed it. I leaned against the stone railing, looking out over Copley Square, trying to slow my racing heartbeat. That's when my phone buzzed. Grandma Eleanor. I answered immediately. Hello? My dear girl. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Tell me what's happening. I glanced through the glass doors at the glittering crowd inside. How do you know something's happening? Because I know my daughter. A pause. Victoria has been planning something for weeks. She's been making phone calls, gathering people, building her case. She thinks I don't know because I'm locked away in my nursing home. The disdain in Eleanor's voice was palpable. She forgets that I have friends who actually like me. I almost laughed. Almost. What is she planning? I don't know exactly, but I know it will happen tonight while she has her audience. That's how Victoria operates. She needs witnesses. She needs people to validate her. Eleanor's voice softened. Paige, do you remember the number I gave you? Marcus Webb's number? I have it saved. If anything happens, Anything at all, call him immediately. He's expecting your call. He has everything ready. I pressed my back against the cold stone. Grandma, what is everything? What are you not telling me? Silence stretched across the line. 6 months ago, Eleanor finally said, your friend Daniel came to visit me. Daniel Reeves. We'd been friends since freshman year at BU. He was a reporter now, working the investigative desk at the Boston Globe. He'd mentioned a few months back that he was looking into some irregular real estate transactions in the area, but I hadn't connected it to anything specific. He came to visit you? Why? Because he found something strange, a property sale in 2020, a house in Cape Cod that belonged to me, a house I never sold. My breath caught. What do you mean you never sold it? I mean exactly that. Your mother sold it. For $875,000. She forged my signature on the documents. The world tilted slightly. I gripped the railing. Grandma? I didn't want to believe it either. That's why I hired experts. A company called Forensic Document Services, right here in Boston. They analyzed the signatures. The probability of forgery was 98.7%. 98.7%. That wasn't doubt. That was certainty. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out hoarse. Why didn't you go to the police? Because she's my daughter. Eleanor's voice cracked just slightly before she steadied it. Because I still hope, that there might be some explanation I don't understand. Some reason that isn't what it looks like. But we both knew. We both knew there wasn't. That's why you moved to Brookhaven, I said, understanding flooding through me. Not because you wanted peace and quiet, because you couldn't stand being around her. I couldn't trust her, Paige, and I couldn't prove anything without destroying everything. So I removed myself. I protected what I could protect, the penthouse, my remaining assets, and I waited. For what? For Victoria to make a mistake. Eleanor's voice hardened. Tonight might be that mistake. If she pushes too far, if she exposes herself publicly, then Marcus has everything he needs to respond. The forensic report, the original transaction documents, witnesses who saw me during the time I supposedly signed those papers. I was in the hospital with a broken hip. I couldn't have signed anything. I closed my eyes, absorbing the weight of it all. My mother hadn't just tried to manipulate me. She'd stolen from her own mother. She'd committed fraud. And she'd let Grandma Eleanor take the blame for not being rational when she'd changed her will. Paige! Eleanor's voice pulled me back. I'm not telling you this to make you hate your mother. I'm telling you because you need to understand what you're dealing with. And you need to know that if she corners you tonight, you're not alone. You have never been alone. I heard the jazz band start up again inside, a swing number that felt grotesquely cheerful. What do you want me to do? Whatever happens, don't sign anything. And if it goes badly, if she pushes you beyond what you can bear, call Marcus. Tell him the documents are needed. He'll know what to do. And you? A pause. When Eleanor spoke again, I could hear the smile in her voice. If Marcus calls me, I'll be there within the hour. I've been waiting 3 years for this, darling. I'm not going to miss it. She hung up. I stood on that balcony for a long moment, cold wind whipping my hair. Then I straightened my shoulders, smoothed my dress, and walked back into the ballroom. I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. I'm going to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching this have been in situations like mine, where you're surrounded by people who are supposed to love you, but instead they make you feel small. If this story is hitting close to home, let me know in the comments. Should I have walked out right then? Or was I right to stay and face what was coming? Your answers mean more to me than you know. Now let me tell you what happened next. 7:30 p.m. Dinner had been served and cleared. The toasts had been made. Richard's stiff, perfunctory speech about legacy and family values. Tyler's father waxing poetic about the merger of two great Boston families. Madison's maid of honor, telling a story about their sorority days that made everyone laugh politely. I sat at table 14, near the back of the ballroom, with a collection of distant cousins and family friends who seemed unsure why I was there. Fine by me, I wanted to be invisible. But Victoria Harrison had other plans. The clink of metal against crystal cut through the room's chatter. My mother stood at the head table, champagne flute in hand, microphone in the other. Her smile was radiant, her Valentino gown glittered under the chandeliers. "If I could have everyone's attention," she said, "I'd like to take a moment for something very special, a family tradition that Madison has asked me to facilitate." I felt the first prickle of warning at the base of my spine. As many of you know, the Harrison family believes in taking care of each other. We support each other. We make sacrifices for each other. Victoria's eyes swept the room, landing briefly on me before moving on. And tonight, in the spirit of that love, I'd like to invite my eldest daughter, Paige, to join me up here. 127 pairs of eyes turned toward table 14. I didn't move. I couldn't move. "Paige, sweetheart?" Victoria's voice carried a note of gentle encouragement that I knew was performance. "Come on up, honey. Don't be shy." What choice did I have? If I refused, I would be the difficult one, the ungrateful one, the sister who ruined Madison's wedding with her stubbornness. I stood. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else as I walked through the maze of tables, past the whispered comments and curious stares, up to the raised platform where my mother waited with her serpent's smile. "There she is." Victoria put an arm around my shoulders, a gesture of affection for the audience, a grip of control for me. "Now, everyone, Paige has been holding on to something very precious. Our mother, my mother, left her a beautiful penthouse apartment in the Seaport district. $2.1 million in value, quite an inheritance." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Patricia Holloway nod knowingly. "Paige has been keeping it safe," Victoria continued, "waiting for just the right moment to share it with the family. And what better moment than this, Madison's wedding day, the start of her new life with Tyler." She produced a folder from somewhere, I hadn't even seen her holding it, and opened it to reveal a thick stack of legal documents. Transfer of deed, quitclaim agreement. My name already typed in the signature lines. All Paige needs to do is sign, and this incredible gift will help Madison and Tyler start their marriage in a home that truly reflects their future. The room actually applauded. They applauded, like this was a heartwarming moment, like I was about to perform an act of sisterly love, not be publicly coerced into giving away my inheritance. "Mom," my voice was quiet but steady, "I'm not signing this." Victoria's smile didn't waver. "Don't be nervous, sweetheart. It's just paperwork." "It's not just paperwork. It's the apartment Grandma Eleanor left to me. Not to Madison, not to the family, to me." The applause died. The silence that replaced it was deafening. "Paige." Victoria's grip on my shoulder tightened. Her voice dropped, but the microphone still carried it. "Let's not make this difficult. I'm not making it anything. I'm telling you no." Madison appeared at the edge of the platform, her face a mask of wounded innocence. "Paige, you're really going to do this? On my wedding day?" "Madison, I didn't ask to be called up here. I didn't ask to be put on display. You all set this up without even asking me." "Because we knew you'd be selfish," Madison spat. "We knew you'd choose that stupid apartment over your own family." "The apartment isn't stupid when you want to live in it." Tyler's father coughed uncomfortably. A waiter near the kitchen doors looked frozen in place, tray suspended in air. This was not the elegant evening anyone had envisioned. Victoria's composure finally cracked. Her face reddened. Her voice rose. "You ungrateful child." The microphone amplified every syllable. "After everything we've done for you, after we raised you, educated you, supported your little business, you can't do this one thing for your sister? You didn't support my business, you've never even been to my studio, and you didn't raise me. Grandma did, every summer, while you were at conferences and galas and anywhere else that wasn't home. Gasps scattered through the audience. I'd said too much, I knew it, but I couldn't stop. The penthouse is mine because Grandma wanted me to have it, because I was there, because I cared. And no amount of public humiliation is going to change that. Victoria's hand moved so fast I didn't see it coming. The slap connected with my left cheek, hard enough to snap my head sideways. My silver earring, the one Grandma Eleanor had given me for my 30th birthday, flew off my ear and bounced across the marble floor with a sound like a small bell. The room went absolutely silent. For a moment, I stood perfectly still. My cheek burned, my vision blurred. I could feel every eye in that ballroom boring into me, waiting to see what I would do. What I did was breathe. I bent down. I picked up the earring. It was slightly bent, but not broken. I straightened it carefully, methodically, and put it back on my ear. Then I looked at my mother. "That's the last time you touch me," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. I turned and walked off the platform, through the tables, past the whispers and the stares and the jazz band that had stopped playing mid-note, out the double doors of the ballroom and into the lobby. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I found a quiet corner near the concierge desk, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number I'd saved a week ago. It rang once. Marcus Webb's office. "This is Paige Harrison," I said. My voice was calm, steady, certain. "Please tell my grandmother that the documents are needed." "Understood, Miss Harrison. She'll be there within the hour." I hung up, and then I sat down on a velvet bench, touched my stinging cheek, and waited. 1 hour, that's all I needed. 1 hour until everything changed. 8:45 p.m. I was still on that velvet bench when the main doors of the Fairmont Copley Plaza opened and my grandmother walked in. Eleanor Harrison was 78 years old. She moved with a cane now, her gait slower than I remembered from my childhood. But everything else about her radiated the same formidable presence that had made her one of the most respected professors at Harvard Law for 3 decades. She wore a gray cashmere coat over a simple black dress. Her silver hair was pinned back elegantly, and beside her walked Marcus Webb, mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it contained the weight of the world. "Grandma." I stood up, and for a moment my composure cracked. "You came." She crossed the lobby and took my face in her hands, examining my cheek with eyes that missed nothing. "She hit you." "Yes." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Then she kissed my forehead, gently, the way she had when I was a child and had fallen off my bicycle. "Then let's finish this," she said. We walked into the ballroom together. The wedding was in chaos, clusters of guests huddled in conversation, their champagne forgotten. Madison was crying, actually crying this time, while Tyler and his parents hovered nearby, looking mortified. Victoria stood near the head table, gesturing emphatically to Richard, who seemed to be trying to calm her down. No one noticed us at first. Then someone gasped. Then someone else. And then Victoria turned and saw her mother walking toward her across the marble floor. "Mom?" The word came out strangled. Victoria's face went white. "What are you? How are you?" "I'm here for my granddaughter's wedding," Eleanor said. Her voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "I wasn't invited, of course, but I decided to come anyway. I hope Madison doesn't mind." Madison, mascara streaming down her cheeks, could only stare. "What is this?" Victoria's voice rose. "What are you doing here?" "I'm doing what I should have done 3 years ago." Eleanor stopped about 10 feet from her daughter, close enough for everyone to hear. "I'm telling the truth." She turned to face the assembled guests. 127 people, many of them lawyers and judges and professionals, who understood exactly what was about to happen. "My name is Eleanor Harrison. I was a professor of law at Harvard for 31 years. I am of sound mind, and I am here to confirm that the penthouse at 150 Seaport Boulevard, the property my daughter has been publicly demanding my granddaughter surrender, was left to Paige Harrison in my will, dated June 14, 2019. That will is legal, valid, and enforceable. There are no other claims to that property. Marcus Webb opened his briefcase and withdrew a document. This is a certified copy of Mrs. Harrison's will, notarized and filed with the Suffolk County Probate Court. I've been her attorney for 23 years and can attest to its authenticity. Victoria's face contorted. This is absurd. Mother, you're confused. You don't understand what you're saying. I understand perfectly. Eleanor's voice was ice. What you don't understand is that I've been watching you. For 3 years I've been watching. She nodded to Marcus, who withdrew a second set of documents. These are transaction records for a property in Cape Cod, a property that was deeded in my name until September 12, 2020, when it was sold for $875,000. The room went completely silent. I could hear the ice melting in abandoned champagne buckets. I did not sell that property, Eleanor continued. I could not have sold that property. I was in Massachusetts General Hospital for 6 weeks that fall, recovering from a broken hip. I signed nothing. I authorized nothing. Victoria's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Marcus produced a third document. This is a forensic analysis report from Forensic Document Services, a certified firm specializing in handwriting analysis. They examined the signature on the Cape Cod sale documents against authentic samples of Mrs. Harrison's handwriting. He turned to the room, his voice carrying the weight of courtroom authority. Their conclusion? The signature is inconsistent with Mrs. Harrison's authentic hand. Probability of forgery, 98.7%. Murmurs erupted through the ballroom. I saw Tyler's father, the managing partner at Ropes and Gray, exchange a significant look with another attorney near the bar. You're lying, Victoria's voice cracked. This is all fabricated. You're senile, Mother. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm sharp enough to hire experts, Eleanor replied. I'm sharp enough to preserve evidence. And I'm sharp enough to have forwarded this entire file to the Suffolk County District Attorney's office last week. The color drained completely from Victoria's face. You didn't? Forgery and fraud, Victoria. Up to 5 years in prison under Massachusetts law. Eleanor's voice was almost gentle now, the same tone she'd once used to explain complex legal concepts to first-year students. I didn't want to believe my own daughter could do this. I gave you 3 years to confess, to make it right. But instead, you spent those years slandering my granddaughter, calling her a manipulator, calling me senile, trying to steal her inheritance the same way you stole my property. Victoria spun to face Richard. Richard, say something! Stop this! Richard Harrison, who had stood silently through everything, took a step backward. I didn't know, he said. His voice was flat, empty. I didn't know about the Cape Cod house. You signed the transfer, Victoria shrieked. You were there. I signed what you told me to sign. I didn't know it was forged. The room watched in horrified fascination as 35 years of marriage disintegrated in real time. Madison finally spoke, her voice small and broken. Mom? What is Grandma talking about? Victoria didn't answer. She couldn't answer. She stood in the center of her own carefully constructed stage, her perfect wedding, her perfect audience, and everything was falling apart. Eleanor turned to me. Her eyes were tired, sad, but resolute. Paige, I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry I waited so long. It's okay, Grandma. I took her hand. I understand. She squeezed my fingers. Then she looked at Victoria one last time. You lost me the day I discovered what you'd done. Tonight, everyone else just got to see the truth. She paused. I hope someday you find it in yourself to take responsibility, but I won't hold my breath. She turned toward the exit. I walked beside her. Behind us, I heard Victoria start screaming. Incoherent denials, accusations, demands that someone do something. I heard Tyler's parents say something sharp and final to Madison. I heard the murmur of the crowd crescendo into a roar of gossip and speculation, but I didn't look back. Not once. I need to pause here for a second. When I walked out of that ballroom with my grandmother, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't thinking about winning. I was just thinking about how much time we'd lost, and how grateful I was that we still had some left. If you've ever had someone in your life who believed in you when no one else did, drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be celebrated. And if you want to hear how this all played out, make sure you're subscribed. Back to the story. We made it to the lobby before Tyler caught up with us. I heard his footsteps first, the quick, sharp click of expensive dress shoes on marble. I turned, expecting anger, maybe threats. What I saw instead was calculation. Mrs. Harrison, Tyler Caldwell addressed my grandmother directly, not even glancing at me. I think we should talk about this privately. There may be some misunderstandings that can be cleared up. Eleanor regarded him with the same expression she probably used on particularly dim-witted law students. There are no misunderstandings, Mr. Caldwell. But surely the whole Cape Cod situation, families have disputes. Paperwork gets complicated. If we could just sit down with the lawyers. The paperwork was forged. My daughter committed fraud. Those aren't disputes, they're crimes. Tyler shifted his weight, and I watched his mask slip. Underneath the polished veneer, I glimpsed something desperate. The penthouse, then. Madison mentioned that you might be reconsidering your will. Given the circumstances, the wedding, the new family, perhaps there's a way to… Mr. Caldwell. Eleanor's voice cut like surgical steel. I'm not reconsidering anything. The penthouse belongs to Paige. It will continue to belong to Paige. And if you're asking whether I'll give my remaining assets to a granddaughter who just married a man willing to beg at a ballroom door, the answer is no. Tyler's face reddened. For a moment, I thought he might say something ugly. Instead, Eleanor smiled. That particular smile that made courtroom attorneys nervous. You married the wrong Harrison, young man. And frankly, given what I've seen of your character tonight, Madison is welcome to you. She turned away from him without another word. Marcus Webb stepped forward, blocking Tyler's path. I'd advise you to return to your wedding, Mr. Caldwell. Anything you say now could be relevant to ongoing investigations. Tyler Caldwell, son of a managing partner at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, suddenly looked very young and very scared. He retreated without another word. We stepped out into the cold March night. The air smelled like impending rain, and the street lights cast golden pools on the cobblestones of Copley Square. Grandma, I said, my voice thick, I'm so sorry about the wedding, about the scene, about all of it. She patted my arm. Don't be sorry. I've been waiting 3 years to say those things. It felt wonderful. Despite everything, I laughed. It came out raw and broken, but it was real. What happens now? Marcus answered, his voice measured and professional. The district attorney's office will proceed with their investigation. Mrs. Harrison has provided substantial documentation. Whether charges are filed will depend on their review, but the evidence is compelling. And Victoria? Eleanor's face softened with something that might have been grief, or might have been relief. It was hard to tell. That's up to the courts now. I've done what I needed to do. The rest is out of my hands. I thought about my mother, still in that ballroom, surrounded by the people she'd spent her life trying to impress, watching everything she'd built crumble. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction, but a larger part just felt tired. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was telling them or myself. I'm not doing it to punish her. No, Eleanor agreed. You're doing it because some things can't be allowed to continue. Some lies can't be permitted to stand. She looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. There's no cruelty in telling the truth, Paige. There's only clarity. A town car pulled up to the curb. Marcus had arranged it while we were inside. I should get your grandmother back to Brookhaven, he said. It's been a long evening. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. I'm not fragile, Marcus, but yes, I am tired. She turned to me. Come visit tomorrow. We have a great deal to talk about. And I want to hear how your design business is going. Really hear, not the polished version you give me. I'll be there. She hugged me. A real hug this time, not the performative embrace Victoria had given me on that stage. I held on longer than I probably should have. I love you, my sweet girl, she murmured. I love you too, Grandma. She climbed into the car with Marcus's assistance. I watched as it pulled away, disappearing into the Boston night. I stood alone on the sidewalk for a long time. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Reeves. Just saw the Globe's legal beat guy tweet something cryptic about a prominent Boston attorney. Was that? I typed back. I'll explain later. Thank you for everything. Another text. This one from a number I didn't recognize. Paige. It's Jennifer Thompson from Becker Legal. We were at the wedding. I owe you an apology. I believed things I shouldn't have. If you're ever interested in discussing design work for our new office, please call me. I stared at the screen. Jennifer Thompson. One of the women I'd seen whispering with Patricia Holloway earlier that evening. Now offering me business. I wasn't sure if I'd call her, but I saved the number. Then I put my phone away, pulled my coat tighter against the cold, and walked toward the parking garage. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. The fallout was swift and measured. 2 weeks after the wedding, Victoria Harrison was summoned to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office for questioning regarding the Cape Cod property sale. The interview lasted 4 hours. When she emerged, according to what Marcus later told me, she looked 10 years older. Her attorney, a colleague from her tennis club who'd originally agreed to represent her, withdrew from the case within days, citing conflict of interest. The real reason, I suspected, was that he'd seen the evidence and wanted nothing to do with a losing battle. Or perhaps he'd heard from enough mutual friends that continuing to represent Victoria would damage his own standing in Boston's legal community. My father moved to a hotel on March 28th, the Ritz-Carlton, because even in crisis, Richard Harrison maintained appearances. He released a statement through a family friend stating that he was seeking space to process recent revelations and had no prior knowledge of any improper transactions. Whether anyone believed him was another matter. His signature was on the transfer documents alongside Victoria's. Claiming ignorance only worked if people were inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt, and after 30 years of standing silently beside his wife, Richard had used up most of his goodwill. Madison and Tyler postponed their honeymoon indefinitely. I heard from a cousin that Tyler's parents had concerns about the financial entanglement and wanted their son's legal exposure clarified before the couple traveled internationally. The dream of moving into my penthouse was, of course, dead. The social consequences unfolded more quietly, but with devastating precision. On April 3rd, Victoria received an email from Partners for Justice, the charity organization whose annual gala she'd co-chaired for 17 years. The subject line read, "Your invitation status has been updated." The body was brief and corporate. Due to circumstances requiring legal resolution, her involvement in the upcoming gala was under review pending further developments. Translation: she was disinvited. The Boston Bar Association opened an ethics inquiry after 2 attorneys who'd attended the wedding filed formal complaints. The complaints didn't allege anything Victoria had done to them, they alleged conduct unbecoming of an officer of the court. The investigation was ongoing. On April 10th, a small item appeared in the Boston Globe's Legal Beat column, written by a reporter I recognized from Daniel's newsroom. Boston area attorney under investigation for alleged document fraud in 2020 real estate transaction. The Suffolk County DA's office confirmed the investigation is active, but declined to comment on specifics. The attorney, whose name has not been released, is reportedly connected to a prominent Boston legal family. No names. But in a community as insular as Boston's legal establishment, no names were needed. Everyone knew within hours. I received 11 text messages that week from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some were apologies, Some were expressions of support. A few were clearly fishing for gossip, which I ignored. The message that mattered most came from Jennifer Thompson at Becker Legal. She followed up her wedding night text with a formal email. Subject: sincere apologies and a professional inquiry page. I want to begin by apologizing properly. At the wedding, I made assumptions based on things Victoria had told me over the years. Watching what actually happened that night, watching how you handled yourself with such dignity under impossible circumstances, made me ashamed of my own credulity. I don't expect forgiveness, but I would like to offer something concrete. Our firm is renovating our conference floor, and we're looking for an interior designer who understands professionalism, discretion, and good taste. If you're interested, I'd love to discuss the project. Please let me know either way. And again, I'm sorry. Jennifer. I sat with that email for 3 days before responding. Part of me wanted to reject it, to refuse anything that came from Victoria's social circle. But another part recognized that Jennifer Thompson wasn't Victoria. She was someone who'd been lied to, who'd believed those lies, and who was now trying to make amends. I took the meeting. The project was substantial: a full redesign of 2 conference rooms and a reception area for a mid-sized law firm. Budget: $82,000. Timeline: 3 months. It was the largest contract I'd ever landed. By May, I'd received 2 more project inquiries from attorneys who'd been at the wedding. Word was spreading, not just about Victoria's downfall, but about my work. People who dismissed me as the Harrison daughter with the decorating hobby were suddenly curious about the Harrison daughter who'd stood her ground. I didn't trust all of them. I vetted every client carefully, asked pointed questions about how they'd heard about me, and turned down one project from someone who seemed a little too eager to pump me for information about Victoria's case. But slowly, carefully, I began to rebuild. Not just my business, my sense of who I was. The strangest development came in early May. I received a certified letter from a real estate attorney in Cape Cod informing me that the 2020 sale of Eleanor's property was under legal review and that the current owners had been notified of potential title defects. Marcus explained what this meant. If the original sale was voided due to fraud, the buyers might have claims against Victoria for the purchase price. The property itself could potentially revert to Eleanor's estate. It's complicated, he said, and it could take years, but the wheels are turning. Victoria Harrison, who had spent her life accumulating status and property and social capital, was watching it all slip away. I won't pretend I didn't feel some satisfaction in that, but mostly I felt something closer to peace. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about the world finally recognizing what was true. June 2024. 3 months after the wedding. I'm sitting on the balcony of my penthouse, watching the sun set over Boston Harbor. The sky is streaked with orange and pink, and the water reflects it all like scattered jewels. It's the kind of evening my grandmother always loved. Big skies, quiet moments, a glass of wine, and nowhere to be. She's here now, in fact. Eleanor comes every Sunday. I pick her up from Brookhaven in the morning, and we spend the day together. Sometimes we go to the Museum of Fine Arts. Sometimes we just sit here, on this balcony, and talk. Today, we've been talking about my father. He called me, I tell her. Yesterday. She raises an eyebrow. And? He wanted to explain, to tell me his side of things. I swirl my wine. He says he didn't know about the Cape Cod house. He says Victoria handled all the paperwork, and he just signed where she told him. Do you believe him? I think about it. Really think. I believe he didn't ask questions, I finally say. I believe he chose not to know. I believe he's been choosing not to know for 35 years about a lot of things. Eleanor nods slowly. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed time, that I wasn't ready to see him yet, that if he wanted a relationship with me, he'd have to earn it, not by explaining or apologizing, but by actually showing up, consistently, over time. She reaches over and squeezes my hand. That's a healthy boundary, sweetheart. We sit in comfortable silence for a while. The sunset deepens. Madison texted me, I add. Last week. I heard. She asked if I would call her. She said she wants to talk. And will you? I look out at the harbor, at the boats returning to their moorings, at the city lights beginning to flicker on. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I pause. She knew, Grandma. Maybe not about the Cape Cod house, but about the pressure, the manipulation, the lies. She was there every time Victoria called me selfish or ungrateful. She never once defended me. She never once questioned what she was being told. That's true. If she wants to have a sister, she has to want to know the truth. She has to be willing to see who our mother really is. And I don't think she's there yet. I don't think she wants to be there. I take a breath. So I'm not closing the door forever. But I'm not opening it until she's ready to walk through it honestly. Eleanor smiles. A small, proud smile. You've learned something important, Paige. Something I wish I'd learned at your age. What's that? That love without respect isn't love. It's just habit. She looks at me with those clear, knowing eyes. You deserve both. I started therapy in April. My therapist's name is Dr. Carolyn Mitchell, and she specializes in family systems and boundary setting. Every Tuesday at 4, I sit in her office in Cambridge and talk about things I spent 32 years avoiding. It's hard. Some weeks it's exhausting. But it's also the most important thing I've ever done for myself. There's something else, too. His name is Ben, and he's an architect I met at a design conference in May. He has kind eyes and a terrible sense of direction and absolutely no idea who the Harrisons of Beacon Hill are. He likes me, for my work, my laugh, my habit of talking to plants. It's new, it's slow, it's the first time I've let someone in without worrying about what they might think of my family. My grandmother finishes her wine and sets the glass down. You know, she says, I've been thinking about what I want my legacy to be. You've already given me a legacy, I say, gesturing at the penthouse around us. Not the property. She shakes her head. I mean the other thing. The thing that matters. I wait. I spent too many years keeping the peace, she says. Staying quiet to avoid conflict. Letting Victoria become who she became because confronting her was too painful. She looks at me steadily. I don't want that for you. I want you to speak the truth, even when it's hard. I want you to protect yourself, even when it feels selfish. I want you to know that being kind doesn't mean being silent. I feel tears prick my eyes. I'll remember. Good. She pats my hand. Now what's for dinner? All this emotion is making me hungry. I laugh, and the sound fills the evening air. This is my life now. A penthouse that's really mine. A grandmother who loves me. A business that's growing. Boundaries that are firm. A future I'm building myself. One honest choice at a time. If you're watching this, maybe you're in a situation where your family expects you to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. Maybe you've been told that setting limits is selfish. Maybe you're wondering if you're allowed to want more. You are. You're allowed. Being kind to yourself isn't the opposite of being kind to others. It's the foundation. Thank you for staying until the end. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that you deserve respect, that your boundaries matter, that truth is worth telling, leave a comment. Tell me your story. I want to hear it. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way through. If it helped you remember that you're worthy of respect, that saying no doesn't make you a bad person, then this was worth telling. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about boundaries, family, and finding your way. Check the description for more videos like this one. And until next time, remember, protecting your peace is not a crime, it's a necessity. Take care, I'll see you soon. My father's heart stopped at 4:17 on a Wednesday afternoon. By 8:30 that same evening, his wife had changed the locks on the front door. She was standing in the hallway when I came downstairs with my overnight bag, and she said the sentence she must have been rehearsing since the hospital called. "This is my house now. Pack your things and go." I had a duffel bag, a laptop, and a set of keys to a building she did not know existed. I zipped the bag and walked past her without a word. She had no idea what she had just done. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones always have the last word. If you are new here, subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss what happens next. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for this one. The Wednesday before my father died, I drove 40 minutes to his house for dinner, the way I did every week. Linda had made pot roast. She always made pot roast on Wednesdays, and she always set 3 places at the table. Mine was never one of them. I did not say anything about it anymore. I had stopped saying anything about it 6 years ago. I would come in through the side door, find my plate in the cabinet, set it at the corner of the table where the placemat was a little shorter than the others, and eat whatever Linda had cooked. The routine was so familiar that it no longer required thought. My father was sitting at his usual chair when I walked in. He looked smaller than I remembered. His skin had the color of old newspaper, and his hands shook when he picked up his fork. He had been losing weight for months, and Linda kept saying it was his appetite. But I had pulled his medical records through the hospital portal. I knew it was his heart. Cora was scrolling through her phone across from him, her chair pushed back from the table, one knee up. She was 24 and still living at home, which Linda described as smart, and which I described as nothing, because it was not my business. My father asked me a question halfway through the meal. He set his fork down and said, "Did you get that building file sorted out?" Linda cut him off before I could answer. "Douglas, not at dinner. We were talking about the remodel." He looked at me. I looked at him. He picked up his fork again. After dinner, I washed the dishes. I always wash the dishes. On the counter beside the sink there was a stack of mail. The electric bill, an insurance statement, and a letter from a law firm addressed to Douglas Irving. The envelope was unopened. Linda swept the entire stack into a drawer before I could read the return address. "Just junk," she said. I dried my hands on the towel and drove home. The onion smell from the cast iron skillet stayed on my coat the entire drive back. I rolled the window down at the highway merge and let the cold air pull it out. That was the last Wednesday I ate in that house. My mother died when I was 10. Her name was Helen, and she had brown hair and a quiet laugh, and a way of folding laundry that made it look like she was thinking about something else entirely. I remember the laundry more than I remember the funeral. After she was gone, my father did not know what to do with a 10-year-old girl who cried in the bathtub every night. He was not built for conversations about feelings. He was built for spreadsheets and assessments, and the particular kind of silence that men from small towns carry around like a second coat. So he did the only thing he knew how to do. He taught me math. Every Saturday morning, he drove me around in his old truck, the kind with cloth seats that smelled like leather even though they were not leather. And we looked at houses. Not to buy, just to look. He would pull up in front of a property with a for sale sign and say, "What do you think this one's worth?" I would guess. He would correct me. Then he would explain why. Square footage, lot size, comparable sales, interest rates, the way a north-facing kitchen lost value in winter markets. I did not understand half of it, but I understood that he was talking to me, and that was enough. By the time I was 12, I could read a mortgage statement faster than most adults. I could estimate property tax from a listing photo. I could tell you whether a house was overpriced by the way the agent described the neighborhood. "Money does not fix everything," my father said one Saturday, idling in front of a 2-story colonial with a cracked driveway. "But it fixes a lot of things that people pretend have nothing to do with money." That same year, he married Linda. She came into the house with a 2-year-old daughter named Cora, and a smile that covered every room like fresh paint. She rearranged the kitchen. She bought new curtains. She cooked pot roast on Wednesdays and banana bread on Sundays, and she called my father honey in a voice that made it sound like she had been practicing. I wanted to like her. I tried, but within 6 months, my bedroom had been repainted pink and renamed Cora's playroom. And I was sleeping in the smallest room in the house, the one next to the garage that smelled like motor oil and cold concrete. My father said, "Linda had a hard time before. Be patient." I was 12. I was patient. Linda was not a bad person the way people in movies are bad. She did not yell or throw things or lock me in a closet. She was worse than that. She was thorough. Within 2 years of moving in, she had reorganized every room in the house to center around Cora. The family photos on the mantel shifted. First, a few of Helen were moved to the hallway, then to the upstairs landing, then to a box in the attic labeled Old Frames. Linda replaced them with studio portraits of herself, Douglas, and Cora. In one of them, taken at a department store photo booth, all three of them wore matching navy sweaters. I was not in the photo. I had not been invited to the session. She controlled the money, too. Not in a dramatic way. She kept a spreadsheet on the family desktop. Every grocery run, every gas receipt, every subscription. She tracked it and presented it to my father on the first of each month. She called it our family budget review. It was the only meeting I was never invited to attend. When I asked my father about it, he said Linda had been through financial hardship in her first marriage. Her ex-husband had left her with nothing. No savings, no car, no credit history. The fear of that happening again drove her to control every dollar that entered the house. I understood the logic. I even felt sympathy for it, for a while. But sympathy has a shelf life when the person receiving it uses it to justify pushing you further and further from the center of your own family. By the time I was 14, my room was the smallest in the house, and my name was the one Linda forgot to write on the Christmas cards. She sent them every December, the Irving family on the front, a photo of the three of them on the back. When our neighbor, Mr. Hamblin, asked why I was not in the picture, Linda laughed and said, "Oh, Paige is so busy with school. She never has time for photos." I was standing right there. I was not busy. I had been home all afternoon. My father heard the exchange. He looked at me across the kitchen counter, and for a moment I thought he was going to say something. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He picked up his coffee and walked to the garage. That was the year I stopped expecting anyone to fix it for me. The summer I turned 16, my father drove me to his office on a Saturday morning. He closed the door, sat me down across from his desk, and opened a manila folder with my name on it. "I started this for you 2 years ago," he said. $5,000 in an index fund. It is in your name." I looked at the statement. The balance had grown to $6,200. I did not understand compound interest yet. Not really, but I understood the weight of what he was doing. He was building something for me that Linda could not reach. "Do not mention this to Linda," he said. He held up his hand before I could respond. "Not because it is a secret. Because she will worry. She worries about everything that she cannot track on her spreadsheet." He taught me how to read the quarterly reports. He showed me how to check the fund's performance against the index. He handed me a pocket calculator, a cheap one, the kind with a cracked plastic case and buttons that stuck, and said, "Keep this. Do your own math. Always." I kept it. I still have it. Over the next 2 years, my father added to the fund when he could. Not large amounts. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. He also started talking to me about a building he owned a partial stake in, a commercial property downtown, 6 floors, mostly office space. He had bought in when the neighborhood was rough and the price was low. "Someday this will be yours," he said, the way other fathers might say, "Someday this truck will be yours." I nodded. I did not ask questions. I had learned by then that when my father gave me something, the best thing I could do was be quiet and hold on to it. The desk lamp hummed. The calculator clicked under my thumb. Outside, through the office window, I could hear a lawnmower running 2 houses down, and the low static of the AM radio my father always kept tuned to the market station. 6 years later, I graduated summa cum laude in forensic accounting. The fund my father started with $5,000 had grown to $62,000, and the building downtown, the one he said would someday be mine, was already in my name. He had transferred the first shares on my 18th birthday. I did not tell anyone. There was nothing to tell. It was just math. I left for college at 18 and did not come back. Not in the way people leave dramatically. No slamming doors, no tearful goodbyes, No arguments in the driveway. I just packed 2 suitcases, loaded them into the used sedan my father had helped me buy, and drove east to a university 4 hours away. Linda waved from the kitchen window. Cora, who was 8 at the time, did not look up from the television. I rented an apartment near campus, a studio with one window that faced a parking lot, a radiator that clanged at night, and a coffee maker I bought at a thrift store for $7. The coffee was terrible. I drank it every morning and felt, for the first time in 6 years, like I could breathe. My father and I talked every Sunday. He would call at 9 in the morning, before Linda was up, and we would spend 20 minutes going over the fund, the building shares, the market. He never asked about my classes. I never asked about Linda. It was our language, numbers instead of feelings, returns instead of apologies. And it worked. Each time I drove back to visit, something in the house had changed. The first year, my bedroom had been converted into a yoga studio. A roll-out mat on the floor, incense on the windowsill, a speaker mounted on the wall that played ocean sounds. The second year, the garage had been remodeled into a craft room for Cora. The third year, even the hallway photos had been updated. There was not a single picture of me visible on the first floor of the house I grew up in. Linda never asked what I did for a living. She never asked how much I earned. She assumed, I could see it in the way she looked at my coat, my car, my shoes, that I was getting by, nothing more. The idea that I might be doing well did not occur to her, because in her mind, I had always been the one who did not matter. Meanwhile, my father continued transferring shares of the commercial building into my name. By the time I was 28, I owned it entirely. The property had appreciated in ways that even he had not predicted. The neighborhood had gentrified. The tenants were paying market-rate leases. The building was worth more than every house on our street combined. Linda remodeled my old bedroom into a yoga studio the same month I signed my first lease. I did not mention it. Neither did she. My father was diagnosed with severe cardiomyopathy the spring I turned 32. The doctors said it could be managed. They said it would require medication, monitoring, and rest. They did not say it would require Linda's permission to visit. But that is what happened. The first time I called to arrange a visit, Linda picked up the house phone and said, "He is resting." The doctor said no stress. The second time she said, "Douglas does not want visitors right now. I am handling everything." The third time I drove to the house without calling. Linda met me at the door and said, "Paige, I know you are worried, but your father needs calm. You showing up unannounced is not calm." She closed the door. I stood on the porch for 2 minutes, then walked back to my car. I called my Aunt Maggie that night. Maggie was my father's younger sister, 70 years old, sharp as a tax audit, and the only person in the family who had never been charmed by Linda's pot roast. Maggie had always seen through her. She just never said it out loud, because Douglas had not asked. "Linda has been telling the family you are too busy with work to visit," Maggie said. "She told the Hamiltons at church that you had not called in weeks." "I have called 14 times in the last month," I said. "I know you have. I also know she got Douglas to sign a financial power of attorney last Tuesday. She is on his bank accounts now." I sat in my apartment, phone in one hand, and felt the floor shift. Not because of the money. My assets were separate, untouchable. Because I recognized the pattern. Linda was not just managing Douglas's care. She was managing access. She was controlling who saw him, what they heard, and what they believed. She was building a wall, and my father was too sick to see it. 3 weeks later, my father had his second stroke. Linda called the family, Maggie, the cousins, the neighbors, the church group. She organized rides, meal deliveries, hospital rotations. She did not call me. I found out from a hospital nurse who recognized my last name in the system and called the emergency contact number on file. My cell phone, which my father had listed years ago before Linda had the chance to change it. He died on a Wednesday. Of course it was a Wednesday. The hospital called me at 4:21 in the afternoon. A nurse named Deborah, calm and practiced, told me that Douglas Irving had suffered a third cardiac event and had not survived. She said it with the kind of steady voice that meant she had done this many times before. She asked if I needed a moment. I said no. I said thank you. I said I would be there by tonight. I drove 3 hours in the dark. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. I thought about the last time I had seen my father, 6 weeks earlier, through the kitchen window as Linda walked me back to my car. He had been sitting at the table looking out at me, and he had raised one hand, not a wave, just a lift of the palm, and held it there until I pulled out of the driveway. I had not been allowed inside that day. When I arrived at the house, there were cars in the driveway, neighbors, a few cousins. The porch light was on, and through the front window I could see Linda in the kitchen, arranging white chrysanthemums in a glass vase. She was wearing a black blouse and her hair was pinned up. She looked like a woman who had been expecting this for a long time. I went in through the side door, my old way in. Upstairs, the yoga studio, my former bedroom, still had the mat rolled out and the incense burner on the windowsill. I set my duffel bag on the mat and sat on the floor. Linda appeared in the doorway within 5 minutes. She stood with both hands on the frame, blocking the hall light. "You are not sleeping here," she said. "This is my house now. Your father would have wanted it that way." I looked at the mat, at the incense, at the speaker on the wall. None of this had been mine for a very long time. "Okay," I said. I picked up my bag, walked downstairs, and passed Cora on the staircase. She was standing 3 steps up, holding her phone against her chest. She did not speak. She looked at me the way you look at someone leaving a building you know they are not coming back to. I drove to a motel 4 miles down the highway. I sat in the car for 20 minutes before I went inside. The key to the building downtown was in my coat pocket. I could feel its edge through the lining. I could have told her. Right there in that hallway, I could have said that I owned a building worth more than every house on that street combined. But some truths are worth more when they arrive on schedule. The funeral was held at a small church on Elm Street, the one with the stained glass window of a shepherd that had been cracked since 1987 and never repaired. My father had attended services there every Easter and every Christmas, and Linda had made sure the program listed her as beloved wife in the second line beneath his name. I arrived early. Linda and Cora were already seated in the front row, centered, shoulders touching. Linda wore a black dress with pearl earrings. Cora wore a new black skirt I had never seen before. They looked like they had coordinated the night before, which they probably had. There were 3 chairs in the family row. 3. I sat in the 3rd row, between a woman I did not recognize and an empty space. The seat creaked. The lilies on the altar smelled like a hospital waiting room. Maggie arrived 5 minutes before the service. She walked straight past the front row, past Linda's pearl earrings and Cora's new skirt, and sat down beside me. She took my hand and held it on her knee without a word. Then she leaned over and whispered, "Douglas prepared everything. Trust me." I nodded. I did not ask what she meant. I could feel the shape of it coming, the way you feel weather changing before the sky changes color. The pastor spoke. 2 neighbors gave short eulogies. One of them called my father a quiet man who showed love through actions, not words. I almost smiled at that. Afterward, in the church parking lot, a neighbor named Mr. Embry approached me. He was holding a paper cup of coffee from the fellowship hall, and he looked confused. "Paige, why were you not sitting with the family?" "There were only 3 chairs," I said. He blinked. He looked at Linda, who was accepting condolences near the hearse with one hand pressed to her collarbone, and he looked back at me, and he said nothing else. Linda made an announcement before the cars pulled away. She stood on the church steps in her black dress, steadied by Cora's arm, and addressed the group. "Douglas was very clear," she said. "The house is our family home. Cora and I will be staying there, as he always intended." She did not look at me when she said it. She did not need to. What she did not announce was the meeting with the estate attorney, scheduled for the following Thursday. Linda started her inventory the morning after the funeral. She began with the house. She called a real estate appraiser, a man named Garfield who wore square glasses and carried a clipboard. He walked through every room, measured the kitchen, opened the attic hatch, and tapped the basement walls with his knuckles. He told Linda the house was worth approximately $380,000. Linda wrote the number on the back of an envelope and underlined it twice. Next, she went to the bank. She presented Douglas's death certificate and requested a summary of all accounts. The teller pulled up the joint savings account, $140,000. Linda frowned. Douglas had earned a good salary for 30 years. Where was the rest? She asked the teller to check for additional accounts. Individual accounts, investment accounts, anything under the name Douglas Irving. The teller typed, scrolled, and shook her head. That is the only account we have on file for this name at this branch. Linda drove home and sat at the kitchen table. Cora came in and poured herself a glass of orange juice. Did you find everything? Cora asked. $380,000 for the house, $140,000 in savings. That is it? Cora set the glass down. That cannot be right. Did you not say he had a building or something? Downtown? Linda looked up. A building? He used to ask Paige about some building file, every Wednesday. You always changed the subject. Linda's face went still. The kitchen was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the drip of the faucet she had been meaning to fix for a year. What building? Linda said. Cora shrugged. I do not know. I just heard him mention it. Linda picked up her phone and called the estate attorney's office. She demanded an earlier meeting. The receptionist said the soonest available was still Thursday. Linda said she would take it. She hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long time. The coffee in her mug went cold. The real estate appraiser's number, $380,000, was still on the back of the envelope, underlined twice. She had expected more. She had expected much more. And for the first time since my father died, I was not the one in the family who was afraid. I stayed at the Pinewood Motor Lodge for 5 nights. The room was $39 a night, and the mattress sagged in the middle, and the shower curtain had a mildew stain shaped roughly like the state of Ohio. It was fine. I had slept in worse places during college. Every morning, I woke up before 6 and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The neon sign outside the window, vacancy, always vacancy, cast a pink glow through the curtain that shifted each time a truck passed on the highway. In those moments, I did not think about money. I thought about my father, about the Saturday drives, about the calculator, about the way he raised his hand through the kitchen window the last time I saw him, not waving goodbye, just holding still. Grief does not care how much money you have. It shows up at 3 a.m. in a motel room that smells like bleach, and it sits on the edge of the bed, and it waits. On the 3rd morning, I called my attorney, Mitchell Hale. He was a 46-year-old estate and asset protection lawyer who spoke in paragraphs and wore ties that were always slightly crooked. I had retained him 2 years earlier when I first realized Linda was positioning herself around my father's finances. I need you to confirm everything is current, I said. Mitchell pulled the files. He read the list back to me. The 6-story commercial building downtown, 100% in my name, transferred in stages between 2008 and 2020. The index fund, now valued at $4.2 million. The secondary real estate portfolio, diversified across 8 properties in 3 states, totaling $5.8 million. Cash reserves and brokerage accounts rounding out the balance. Total value under your name, as of Douglas's date of death, approximately $28 million. Mitchell said. None of it is part of his estate. None of it is subject to probate. None of it is Linda's to claim. I know, I said. I just needed to hear you say it. Are you expecting a challenge? From Linda? Yes. She will not win. I know that too. I hung up and sat on the edge of the motel bed. Outside, a semi-truck downshifted on the highway, and the pink neon sign flickered once and steadied. My father did not leave me money. He left me the roots. I grew the rest myself. I opened my laptop that night and reviewed the portfolio the way I did every quarter. Not because I needed to, because it was the only ritual I had left that still felt like a conversation with my father. The commercial building was the anchor. 6 floors, 32 tenants. Full occupancy for the third consecutive year. My father had bought his first shares when the neighborhood was still zoned industrial, and the closest restaurant was a taco stand that operated out of a converted school bus. He used to drive me past it on Saturdays and say, "Someday, this block will be worth something." He was right. The building alone was valued at approximately $18 million. That number would have been unimaginable when he first bought in. But 25 years of appreciation, neighborhood redevelopment, and commercial lease rates had done what numbers always do when you leave them alone long enough. The index fund, the one he started with $5,000 when I was 16, had grown to $4.2 million. Most of that growth was compound returns, reinvested dividends, and my own contributions from my salary over the years. My father put in the first seed. I watered it every month like he taught me. Then there were the secondary holdings. Equity in 8 smaller commercial properties across 3 states, purchased through the fund's returns and reinvested rental income. $5.8 million. Nothing flashy. Nothing speculative. Just boring, patient, long-term accumulation. The kind of wealth that does not show up in a person's shoes or handbag. $28 million. Under the name Paige Irving. Not a single dollar was in Douglas Irving's estate. Linda was fighting over a house worth $380,000. She was fighting over savings of $140,000. She was changing locks and arranging chrysanthemums and rehearsing sentences about my house, while the person she had kicked out held a portfolio worth more than 50 times the property she was so desperate to claim. I closed the laptop. The motel room was dark, except for the blue glow of the screen fading from the ceiling. Outside, a car pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping across the curtain, then cutting off. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel righteous. I felt tired, and I missed my father. And I wanted to call him and tell him the numbers, the way I had every quarter for 18 years. But some calls cannot be made. Linda called me on a Monday evening, 4 days before the will reading. It was the first time she had dialed my number since the night she told me to pack my bags. Paige. Her voice was sweet, controlled. The same voice she used when company was over and she needed me to clear the dessert plates. "I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Your father, did he ever mention a building? Something downtown?" Cora said he used to bring it up at dinner. "A building," I said. "Yes, some kind of commercial property. I have been going through his papers and I cannot find anything about it. I think everything will be clarified at the reading on Thursday." Silence. Then, "Paige, I was his wife for 22 years. I have a right to know what he owned." "Then the attorney will explain it." "I do not want to wait until Thursday. I want to know now." "I understand." "Are you going to tell me?" "I think Thursday is the right time." She hung up. Then she called back. I did not answer. She called again. And again. 3 calls in 7 minutes. I set the phone face down on the motel nightstand and listened to it vibrate against the wood. 3 short buzzes each time until it stopped. If you have ever sat across from someone who only calls when they need something, you know the tone. It is sweeter than any voice they have ever used with you before. It arrives without an apology for the last thing they said. It skips over the part where they kicked you out of your own home on the night your father died and lands directly on the part where they need information. Linda did not call to see how I was doing. She did not call to say she was sorry about the locks or the duffel bag or the 3 chairs at the funeral. She called because she had found a number that did not add up, and I was the only variable she had not accounted for. I turned off the phone and lay in the dark. The mattress sagged. The neon sign blinked. And somewhere, in a house 4 miles away, a woman was sitting at a kitchen table, realizing for the first time that the person she had dismissed for 22 years might be the most important person in the room. She just did not know how important yet. Maggie called me on Tuesday morning. She did not say hello. She said, "Linda withdrew $80,000 from the joint savings account yesterday." I sat up in bed. "How?" She used the financial power of attorney Douglas signed last spring, walked into the branch with the document and a death certificate, and requested a cashier's check. The power of attorney is not valid anymore. It terminates when the principal dies. I know that. You know that. Apparently, the teller did not. I called Mitchell within the hour. He confirmed it. The transaction had posted $80,000, withdrawn from a joint account using a power of attorney that had legally expired the moment Douglas's heart stopped. The withdrawal is contestable, Mitchell said. A POA ceases at death under state law. The bank may share liability for honoring it, but more immediately, it tells us something about Linda's mindset. What does it tell us? She is panicking. She is grabbing what she can reach, because she suspects there is something she cannot reach. I asked him to pull the transaction records. He did. $80,000 out. The funeral had cost approximately $8,000. The service, the casket, the plot, the flowers. That left $72,000 unaccounted for. Where did the rest go? I asked. I will have the bank trace the cashier's check, but my guess is it went into a personal account Linda opened recently. Print everything. Bring it Thursday. Already done. I hung up and sat at the small motel desk, the one with the laminate top that was peeling at the corner. The printer in Mitchell's office was probably running right now. Transaction statements, POA expiration dates, state statute citations. Each page another brick in a wall that Linda did not know was being built around her. She had taken the money because she was scared. I understood that. Fear makes people do things that logic cannot explain. But understanding something is not the same as excusing it, and $80,000 withdrawn from a dead man's account using an expired legal document is not fear. It is theft dressed up in black clothing and pearl earrings. The will reading was in 4 days. Linda had no idea that every dollar she moved was being documented. Every transaction, every timestamp, every signature she had no legal right to make. I set my phone on the nightstand and turned it off again. Thursday would come soon enough. The law office of Harlan Beckett was on the second floor of a brick building on Main Street, above a dentist's office and across from a bakery that smelled like cinnamon rolls every morning at 7. The staircase was narrow, the banister was wooden, and the carpet on the landing had been replaced so many times that the color no longer matched the walls. Harlan's conference room had a long oval table made of dark wood, 8 chairs upholstered in green leather, and a window that overlooked the parking lot. On the wall behind his chair hung a framed law degree from a state university and a clock with Roman numerals that ticked louder than it should have. Linda arrived first. She wore a black blazer, pressed slacks, and the same pearl earrings from the funeral. Cora followed behind her in a gray cardigan, clutching a small handbag. They sat at the head of the table as though the seating chart had already been decided. Maggie came next. She wore a navy blue dress she had probably owned for 20 years and a pair of flat shoes that made no sound on the carpet. She sat halfway down the table and folded her hands. 2 of my father's cousins arrived together, Arthur and Dean, both in their 60s, both wearing ties that were slightly too short. They nodded at Linda, nodded at Maggie, and took seats near the window. I was the last to walk in. Mitchell was beside me, carrying a leather briefcase with brass clasps. He wore a gray suit and a tie that was, as always, slightly crooked. Linda's eyes locked onto Mitchell immediately. "Who is this?" she said. "My attorney," I said. "Why do you need an attorney?" "Because I am also a beneficiary." Linda smiled, the kind of smile that does not reach past the lips. "Paige, the will is very simple. There is no need for drama." Harlan cleared his throat. He was a tall man with white hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He opened a folder on the table and said, "Before we begin reading the will, I need to explain the structure of Douglas Irving's estate." He said, structure the way an architect might say, foundation, carefully, and with the implication that what came next depended entirely on understanding this part first. Linda sat at the head of the table as if she had already won. Harlan read the will slowly. He was the kind of attorney who believed that legal documents should be heard, not skimmed, and he gave each sentence the weight of a closing argument. "To my wife, Linda Graves Irving. I leave the family residence located at 47 Birchwood Lane, free and clear of any lien or encumbrance. I also leave the remaining balance of our joint savings account. Linda nodded. She pressed her hand flat on the table. To my stepdaughter, Cora Graves, I leave the sum of $20,000 from the education fund established in 2019. Cora blinked. 20,000. She looked at her mother. Linda's jaw tightened, but she kept her composure. That is the entirety of Douglas Irving's probate estate, Harlan said. The room waited. Arthur and Dean exchanged a look. Maggie did not move. Linda leaned forward. The house and the savings. That is what I expected. However, Harlan continued, adjusting his glasses, I am obligated to inform all parties that the probate estate represents only a portion of the assets Douglas Irving accumulated during his lifetime. Linda's hand stopped moving on the table. Over the course of approximately 18 years, Douglas Irving executed a series of legal asset transfers. These transfers were completed during his lifetime, with full legal documentation, tax filings, and notarized instruments. The assets in question are not part of his probate estate, and are therefore not subject to distribution under this will. Linda's voice came out flat. Transfers. To whom? Harlan removed his glasses. He looked at me. The clock on the wall ticked 3 times before he spoke. To his daughter, Paige Irving. The silence that followed was not the kind that feels empty. It was the kind that feels full. The air packed tight with things people wanted to say, but could not find the words for. Linda stood up. The legs of her chair scraped against the hardwood floor. The sound cut across the room like a match striking. What transfers? She said. I am his wife. I have been his wife for 22 years. What are you talking about? Harlan looked at Linda with the patient expression of a man who had delivered unexpected news before and knew that the next 3 minutes would determine everything. Perhaps Mr. Hale can provide the specifics, he said, and gestured toward Mitchell. Mitchell stood. He opened the brass clasps on his briefcase with 2 precise clicks that echoed in the silent room. From inside, he removed 3 folders, each one tabbed, labeled, and organized with the kind of precision that only a lawyer billing by the hour can justify. He placed the first folder on the table. This is the deed of ownership for a 6-story commercial building located downtown. The property was originally purchased by Douglas Irving in 1999. Between 2008 and 2020, ownership was transferred in stages to Paige Irving through a series of legally executed gift transfers. Each transfer was filed with the county recorder, accompanied by gift tax returns, and notarized. He opened the second folder. This is the summary statement for an investment portfolio held in the name of Paige Irving since 2008. The portfolio includes index funds, dividend reinvestment accounts, and equity in 8 additional commercial properties across 3 states. He opened the third folder. This is a consolidated asset valuation, prepared by a certified public accountant, dated as of the week of Douglas Irving's death. Mitchell set his hand on the third folder and looked at the room. The total value of assets held under the name Paige Irving as of that date is approximately $28 million. Nobody moved. Cora's mouth opened. She pressed both hands flat on the table, as if the number had tilted the room. Arthur leaned back in his chair. Dean removed his glasses and set them on the table. Maggie, who had known, simply nodded once and folded her hands tighter. Linda did not sit down. She stood at the head of the table with her fingers gripping the edge, her knuckles turning white against the dark wood. No, she said. No, that is his money. She stole it. Mitchell did not raise his voice. Every transaction was executed by Douglas Irving voluntarily, with independent legal counsel, over a period of 18 years. These are not estate assets. They are the personal property of Paige Irving. Linda turned to me. Her face was the color of the conference room walls. Flat, pale, stripped of the composure she had worn like armor since the funeral. You knew, she said. You sat in that house every Wednesday and ate my food, and you knew. I looked at her. You kicked me out 4 hours after my father died. You changed the locks before his body was cold. You want to talk about what I knew? The clock ticked. Nobody spoke. Mitchell was not finished. He reached into the briefcase one more time and removed a single sheet of paper. He placed it in the center of the table, face up, aligned with the edge. There is one additional matter, he said. Linda was still standing. Her hands had not left the edge of the table. Cora had tears running down both cheeks but was making no sound. On the 9th day following Douglas Irving's death, Mitchell continued, a withdrawal of $80,000 was made from the joint savings account at First Regional Bank. The withdrawal was executed using a financial power of attorney signed by Douglas Irving in March of this year. Harlan looked up from his folder. He already knew where this was going. Under state law, Mitchell said, a power of attorney terminates automatically upon the death of the principal. Douglas Irving died on October 11th. The withdrawal was made on October 20th. The document used to authorize it was no longer valid. Linda's voice came out tight. I needed that money for the funeral. Mitchell slid the paper closer to her. The funeral expenses, as documented by the service provider, totaled $8,214. The withdrawal was $80,000. That leaves $71,786 unaccounted for. The room had the kind of quiet that happens when everyone is doing math in their head at the same time. Arthur looked at the ceiling. Dean looked at his shoes. Maggie looked at Linda with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not pity, but something closer to resignation. As if she had hoped, until this exact moment, that she was wrong about who Linda really was. Harlan spoke next. His voice was measured. Linda, I would advise you to consult with independent counsel before making any further statements regarding that transaction. Cora whispered, Mom. Just the one word. She said it the way someone says it when they are not asking a question, but making a request. Please stop. Please sit down. Please tell me this is not what it looks like. Linda did not sit down. She did not speak. She stood at the head of the table with both hands still gripping the edge, and for the first time in 22 years, she had nothing left to say. Somewhere behind the wall, in the dentist's office below, a drill started up. The sound rose through the floor like a small, persistent alarm that nobody could turn off. Linda sat down. It was not graceful. She dropped into the chair like someone had cut the strings, and her hands fell into her lap, and she stared at the table. 22 years, she said. Her voice was smaller now. The command was gone from it. I cooked for him. I cleaned for him. I drove him to every appointment. I sat in the hospital for 11 hours the night of his first stroke. I held his hand. Nobody answered. The clock ticked. I did not have a career, she said. I did not have savings before him. My first husband left me with a leased car and a maxed credit card and a daughter who was 18 months old. Douglas knew that. He knew what I came from. He promised me I would never go through that again. She looked at Harlan. Does none of that matter? Harlan said carefully. The house is yours. The savings, minus the contested withdrawal, are part of the estate. Douglas did not leave you with nothing, Linda. He left me a house, she said, and he gave her $28 million. He gave her those assets while he was alive, Harlan said. They were his to give. Maggie spoke for the first time. She had been sitting quietly, hands folded, watching the room the way she watched everything, with patience and without commentary, until the right moment. Douglas loved you, Linda, she said. He married you because he loved you. But he also loved Paige, and he knew, we both knew, that you would never share willingly, so he made sure Paige was taken care of before it came to this. Linda looked at Maggie as though she had been slapped. You knew? I knew because Douglas told me, years ago. He said, Linda will never let Paige have anything unless it is already done. He was not being cruel, he was being honest. Cora pulled her chair closer to her mother. She put her hand on Linda's arm. Linda did not acknowledge it. I did not know, Linda whispered. I did not know any of this. And there it was. The truest sentence Linda had spoken in 22 years. She did not know because she had never asked. She did not know because she had never considered the possibility that the quiet girl who washed dishes and drove home every Wednesday might matter more than she assumed. The conference room clock struck the half hour. No one moved to leave. I stood up. Everyone in the room looked at me. Linda with her hands in her lap, Cora with tears drying on her cheeks, Maggie with her steady gaze, Arthur and Dean with their slightly too short ties, Harlan behind his folder, Mitchell beside his briefcase. I did not come here to take anything from anyone, I said. Everything under my name has been mine for years. I came here so that everyone in this room would know the truth. Not part of it, all of it. I looked at Linda. She did not look away. From today forward, I will not call. I will not visit. I will not explain. If you or Cora need to reach me, you can do it through Mitchell. I picked up my bag from the floor beside my chair. I turned to Maggie. Thank you, Aunt Maggie. She nodded. She did not need more than that. We had always understood each other in the same shorthand my father used. A nod, a squeeze, a lifted palm. I walked toward the door. My shoes sounded on the hardwood. A steady rhythm, even and unhurried. I did not look back. At the threshold, I stopped. I turned, not all the way, just enough to see Linda's profile at the head of the table. You said the house is yours, I said. Then keep it. I do not need it. I never did. I closed the door behind me. Not a slam, not a gentle pull, a firm close, the way my father taught me to close a deal. Quiet, deliberate, and final. In the hallway, the carpet was worn thin in front of the elevator. Mitchell fell into step beside me. He did not speak. He knew that some moments do not require commentary. The elevator was broken. We took the stairs. At the landing, Arthur and Dean caught up with us. Arthur extended his hand. Your father would have been proud of you, he said. I shook it. He would have told me to check the portfolio before driving home. Arthur almost laughed. Dean nodded. They walked to their car, and I walked to mine, and the cinnamon roll smell from the bakery across the street followed me down the sidewalk like something warm and ordinary, and completely unrelated to any of what had just happened upstairs. That was fine. Ordinary was fine. I sat in the car for a long time. The parking lot behind the law office was nearly empty. Mitchell had left. Arthur and Dean had left. Inside the building, I assumed Linda and Cora were still in the conference room, still absorbing, still recalibrating the shape of their lives. I put my hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at the brick wall across the lot. There was a drain pipe running down the side of the building with a rust stain shaped like a question mark. I stared at it until my vision blurred, and then I cried. Not for the money, not for Linda. Not for the 22 years of 3-place settings and missing Christmas cards and a yoga mat where my bed used to be. I cried for my father. Because he had known. He had known this day would come. The day Linda would change the locks. The day she would stand in the hallway and say, pack your bags. The day the will would be read and the numbers would speak for themselves. He had seen it years ago, the way he saw undervalued properties and market corrections, and he had prepared for it the only way he knew how. Not with words, with numbers, with documents, with 18 years of quiet transfers, each one a small act of love disguised as paperwork. He could not stop Linda from being who she was. He loved her in his way, and he had chosen to stay with her, and I understood that choice even if I could not fully forgive it. But he had made sure that when the day came, and he knew it would come, I would be standing on ground that no one could take from me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I started the car. On the way home, I drove past the building. My building. 6 stories of glass and brick, with a small brass plaque near the entrance that read, Irving Commercial. I had not changed the name. I did not plan to. I pulled over and sat with the engine idling, looking up at the windows on the 4th floor where the lights were still on. Some tenant working late, unaware that the woman in the car below owned the ceiling above their head. He was right. I was never caught off guard. But I would have traded every dollar in that portfolio to hear him say, good job, one more time. 3 weeks after the reading, Linda hired a lawyer. His name was Brennan, and he specialized in estate contests. He reviewed every document Mitchell had presented: the deeds, the tax filings, the notarized gift transfers, the portfolio statements, and called Linda back within a week. "There is no basis for a challenge," he told her. "The transfers were executed over 18 years by a competent adult with independent legal counsel. There is no evidence of undue influence, coercion, or diminished capacity." Douglas Irving knew exactly what he was doing, Linda argued. She said she had not been informed. Brennan said the law did not require a spouse to be informed of gifts made from individually owned assets. Douglas's separate property was his to give. The building had been purchased before the marriage. The investment fund had been established with separate funds. Every subsequent contribution had been traceable to his own earnings, not community property. "Your husband was generous to you," Brennan told her. "He left you the family home, free and clear. He left you the savings. He did not leave you with nothing." "He left me with nothing compared to what he gave her," Linda said. Brennan did not respond to that. The $80,000 was a separate matter. Mitchell sent a formal letter requesting the return of the $72,000 that exceeded the funeral costs. Linda's attorney advised her to comply. She did. The check arrived at Mitchell's office within 10 days, drawn from a personal account Linda had opened the day after the withdrawal. Cora sent me a text message 3 days later. It was the first direct communication I had ever received from her. It said, "I did not know what she was going to do that night. I am sorry." I read it. I read it twice. I did not reply. Not because I was angry, but because I did not know what to say to someone who had watched me walk down a staircase with a duffel bag and had not said a single word. The family shifted. Arthur and Dean called me. Neighbors who had attended the funeral reached out. The narrative Linda had built. Paige is absent. Paige does not care. Paige is too busy. Collapsed under the weight of the numbers Mitchell had placed on that conference table. Linda, for the first time in 22 years, found herself on the outside of the family she had spent so long controlling. The isolation she had built for me had come home. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever had someone in your family treat you like you were invisible until they needed something from you, you know exactly what this felt like. Not the money part. The part where they only see you when it costs them nothing. If this story is hitting close to home, leave a comment. Tell me, did you ever walk away from someone who only loved you on their terms? And while you are here, please subscribe. It means more than you know. 6 months later, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 7th floor of a building that overlooked a public park. It was not extravagant. It had hardwood floors that creaked near the bathroom door, a kitchen with enough counter space to cook a real meal, and 2 windows in the living room that faced east. So the morning light came in warm and direct and landed on the spot where I put my desk. I opened my own consulting firm that spring. I called it Irving Compliance Group. The name was not an accident. It was not a tribute in the sentimental sense. My father would have hated sentimentality. It was a statement of origin. Everything I knew about numbers, about patience, about reading a ledger the way some people read poetry, it started with him. Maggie came for dinner once a month. She brought bread from the bakery near her house and a bottle of wine she swore was on sale but never actually was. We ate at the small table by the window and talked about Douglas, not with sadness, but with the particular kind of warmth that comes from knowing someone exactly as they were, without revision. He used to say you were the only person in the family who understood interest rates, Maggie told me one evening, cutting a slice of sourdough. He used to say that about everyone he liked, I said. She smiled. No, just you. I kept one thing from the old house. Not the house itself. Not the furniture. Not the photographs Linda had curated so carefully over the years. I kept the calculator. It sat on my desk beside my laptop, a 30-year-old pocket calculator with a cracked plastic case, yellowed buttons, and a display that flickered when you pressed the equals sign too hard. It was the same one my father had handed me the summer I was 16, in his office, with the desk lamp humming and the AM radio murmuring behind us. Linda did not call. I did not expect her to. Cora had sent one more letter, handwritten, on stationery I did not recognize. She wrote about her job search, about the house feeling different now, about how she wished things had been different. I read it. I set it on the kitchen counter and let it sit there for a week. Then I put it in a drawer. I was not ready to reply, and I had learned, finally, that not being ready was not the same as not caring. I was sitting at my desk on a Tuesday morning when I picked up the calculator. It was heavier than it looked. The plastic was warm from the sunlight coming through the window, and the buttons had the soft resistance of something that has been pressed 10,000 times and expects to be pressed 10,000 more. The brand name on the bottom had worn off years ago. The battery compartment had a piece of tape holding it shut, the same piece my father had put there when I was 17, and the latch broke during a Saturday drive. I turned it on. The screen lit up. A faint gray-green glow, the numbers slightly uneven, the decimal point brighter than the digits. It still worked. Of course it still worked. My father did not buy things that stopped working. I typed in the number 2, 8, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 28 million. I looked at it for a long time. The screen held the number without judgment, without commentary, without applause. It was just math. The same way it had always been just math. On those Saturday drives, in the office with the desk lamp, on the quarterly calls, in the motel room at 3 in the morning. My father had said once, sitting in his truck outside a colonial with a cracked driveway, "Money does not fix everything, but knowing how to count it means you will never be caught off guard." He was right. I was never caught off guard. Not by Linda, not by the locks, not by the 3 chairs, not by any of it. But I would have traded every dollar on that screen to hear him say it one more time. I turned the calculator off. The screen went dark. I set it back on the desk, next to the laptop, where it had been every day since I moved in. Then I picked up my coffee, opened my email, and started the day. Outside, the park was filling with joggers and dog walkers, and a woman pushing a stroller through the fallen leaves. The sun was still coming through the east window. The floor creaked near the bathroom door. The bread Maggie had brought on Sunday was still on the counter, wrapped in a cloth napkin, and there was enough left for toast. This was my life. I had built it. And it was enough. My name is Paige Irving, and that is my story. My father did not leave me money. He left me the one thing money cannot buy, the ability to never need anyone's permission to exist. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. There are more stories like mine in the description below. I will see you in the next one. There are 2 kinds of quiet daughters in every house, the ones whose silence is obedience and the ones whose silence is memory. Parents, as a rule, cannot tell them apart. Not until a morning comes when a folder is slid across a table and the daughter lifts her eyes and the mother understands, with sudden, terrible clarity, which kind she had been raising. My name is Quinn Everett. I had just turned 18, and by 9:03 the next morning, my mom was sliding a manila folder across our kitchen table like it was breakfast. She smiled. She said, "Honey, we need to talk about that money." My blood ran cold. She had no idea I already knew. Before I take you into that kitchen, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I read every one. Let me take you back to October. 6 months before the morning my family found out which daughter they had raised. It was a Tuesday in October. The kind where the porch light clicks on by 5. I was cleaning my room. My grandpa's old cedar box sat on my shelf. He'd given it to me on my 17th birthday, the last gift he handed me in person. I hadn't opened it in months. The hinges whispered when I lifted the lid. Inside, a pressed maple leaf from the yard behind the farmhouse, a photo of him and my grandma at their anniversary, and a white envelope, sealed, weighty. On the front, in his steady handwriting, "Open only if something feels off with your mother before your 18th birthday. Call David Caldwell immediately." I sat down on the edge of my bed. I didn't open it. Not yet. I held it. I turned it over. I stared at his handwriting until it blurred. Grandpa had been dead a year and a half, and he'd known. He'd known enough to put a warning inside a cedar box and pray I'd find it. Downstairs I heard paper, the slow, careful crinkle of documents being shuffled, folded. My mom's voice pitched low, Mark's voice, lower. I couldn't hear words. I didn't have to. I put the envelope back in the box. I closed the lid. I went down and poured myself a glass of water. I said nothing about the light being on in the kitchen at 10:30 at night, when my mother was supposed to be in bed. Looking back, that envelope was the first time someone had ever handed me a weapon. I just didn't recognize it yet. I didn't open the letter that night. I should have. My dad died when I was 10. His name was Gregory Everett. He drove a silver Ford Ranger, and one morning in November of 2018, he didn't come back from a delivery run up Route 30. There was fog. There was a semi. There was a trooper at our front door with his hat in his hands. My mother cried for exactly 1 week. Then she started house hunting for a new kitchen. She remarried in 2020. Mark Hollis, contractor, big truck, big laugh. A daughter from his first marriage named Skylar, 2 years younger than me, who moved into the bedroom across the hall. I learned 3 things fast. 1. My mother punished tears. If I cried, she called it drama. She'd sigh. She'd go to the front porch with her wine. 2. My mother punished joy. If I laughed too loud, she called it showing off. She'd narrow her eyes. She'd say, "Quinn?" Inside voice. 3. The only safe setting was flat. So I went flat. I went quiet. By 12, I'd stopped spending my feelings around her. I saved them for Grandma Margaret's porch and Grandpa Harold's tomato vines and the pages of books where other people were allowed to feel things out loud. My mother thought quiet meant obedient. It didn't. Quiet meant I was watching. Quiet meant I was remembering. In my house, emotions were currency. I'd stopped spending mine by 12. My mother called it quiet. I called it not giving her a weapon. 8 years later, she would slide a manila folder across a kitchen table and find out how much I had been paying attention. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dinner at the Hollis house ran on a schedule, 6:30. Mark came in through the garage, boots off at the laundry room, the smell of joint compound and truck cab on him. He'd drop his keys on the counter. Ford, F35. Oh. Loud keys. He'd say, "Another one bailed." Or, "Kitchen in Conestoga had mold behind the drywall." Or, "Permit guy's a crook." My mother would pour his wine before he asked. Skylar would talk. She always talked. That night, a Sunday in March, she'd gotten her Bucknell admission email. Early decision, $65,000 a year before books. Mark raised his glass. "That's my girl." My mother touched Skylar's wrist. "We'll figure out the rest. Don't you worry." Skylar glanced at me. I was cutting my chicken. I didn't look up. I said evenly, "I got the Penn State email yesterday. Main campus." A silence. My mother said, "That's nice, sweetheart." Mark grunted. He took a swallow of wine. "College is a scam. Real money's in the trades. But whatever." He didn't look at me. My mother smiled her charity committee smile. "Quinn, we'll talk about your future. Closer to your birthday." That phrase again. Closer to your birthday. She'd said it 3 times in February, twice already in March. It didn't sound like a celebration. It sounded like an appointment. Mark topped off his glass. He added, casual as weather, "Family money stays with family, Quinn. Not in some lawyer's vault." My mother cut him a look. A fast one. The kind that says shut up too soon. I kept cutting my chicken. I was paying attention. My Grandma Margaret died when I was 14. Breast cancer. She fought it twice. The second time it fought back harder. She held my hand the afternoon she passed. She said, "You are a good, good girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I didn't cry in the hospital. I cried in the parking lot, in the passenger seat of Grandpa's Buick, and he didn't shush me or sigh. He just said, "Let it out, Peanut. Let it out." Grandpa Harold held on for 2 more years. He got quieter. Not sadder. Quieter. Like a house at dusk. The summer I was 16, I moved into his spare room for July and August. I read to him from the chair by the window. I watered the tomatoes. I cooked the eggs the way he liked. Hard yolks, butter, salt. He died in September. A Tuesday. 78 years old. Heart. At the funeral, my mother wore navy and cried at the right volumes. Mark stood in the back and checked his phone. The will was read 2 weeks later. There was a trust. My name on it. A number that made Mark's jaw go loose. About $680,000. Blue chip shares, some cash. The proceeds from a small lot Grandpa had sold in Bucks County. The terms were simple. The assets belonged to me. I couldn't touch principal until my 18th birthday. On that day, full beneficial ownership transferred. The trustee's name on the paperwork was David Caldwell. Grandpa's written note inside the folder said 6 words. Your choice, your life, love, Grandpa. My mother read those 6 words with a look on her face I'd never forget. Not sad, not proud, calculating. Grandpa left me a door. My mother had already hired a locksmith. 6 months before my 18th birthday, a man in a gray suit started showing up at our house. Wednesdays, 4:30. Same car. A charcoal Lexus with an ugly plate frame that said Briggs & Associates, Lancaster. He stayed an hour and 15 minutes. He left with a leather binder under his arm. My mother said he was an insurance guy, then a financial planner, then 1 week, a friend of Mark's. The story changed. His binder didn't. One afternoon in January, I came home early from the library. My shift got cut, snowstorm coming. I pushed through the mudroom door and heard papers on the kitchen table. I stopped. My mother said, "Once she signs, the rest is just paperwork." Mark said, "And if she hesitates?" My mother laughed, short, dry. "Quinn, she'll sign, she always does." I stood in the mudroom with my boots on and my pulse in my ears. Then I opened the door loud. I called out, "Mom, I'm home early." I heard papers sweep. When I came into the kitchen, the table was clear. My mother was smiling. She said, "Snow day, huh? Want some cocoa?" I said, "Sure." On the counter, under her purse, the corner of a folder stuck out. Cream-colored, embossed letterhead. Briggs & Associates, Family Wealth Planning. Skylar walked in behind me. She said, "Is that about Quinn's money?" My mother's smile didn't move. Mark said, "Sky, go upstairs." Skylar went upstairs. My mother handed me cocoa. She said, "Quinny, you're such a good girl." I took the mug. I said, "Thanks, Mom." I went up to my room. That was the moment I stopped being the daughter who didn't know. I just didn't tell anyone I'd crossed over. I opened the envelope that Friday. I walked to Willow Creek Park with it tucked inside my hoodie pocket. The swings were empty. The sky was the color of wet pavement. I sat on a bench that was too cold, and I slit the seal with my thumbnail. The letter was 1 page, Grandpa's handwriting. "Peanut, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong with your mother. I've suspected it for a long time. I never wanted to poison you against her, but I couldn't leave without giving you a door to open. David Caldwell has been my attorney for 30 years. He knows everything. He's waiting for your call. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to choose. I believe you will choose well. Love, Grandpa." Below, in careful block letters, a phone number. Area code 717. I stared at it for a while. My hands were cold. My eyes were not wet. I took out my phone. I dialed. A woman answered. "Caldwell Estate Law. This is Paula." I said, "Hi, my name is Quinn Everett. My grandfather was Harold Everett. He told me to call Mr. Caldwell." She was quiet for half a second. She said, "Hold on, sweetie." A click, then a warm baritone. "Quinn, this is David Caldwell. I've been expecting your call." I couldn't speak for a beat. He said, "Your grandfather and I spoke about this possibility many times. I'm glad you reached out. Can you come to Lancaster next week? Tell your mother it's a college aid meeting." I said, "Yes." He said, "Good. And Quinn, don't change a thing at home. Not your face, not your schedule, not a word." For the first time in a long time, someone believed I could handle the truth. Caldwell's office was on the 2nd floor of a brick building on Prince Street. A green banker's lamp on his desk, a shelf of Pennsylvania statute books, a plant he clearly didn't water enough. He stood up when I walked in, 65 maybe. White hair, kind eyes, a suit that had been tailored 3 administrations ago. He said, "Sit, please. Tea?" I said, "Water." He walked me through it slowly. He used small words. He wrote down terms on a legal pad so I could see them. Trust, beneficial interest, fiduciary duty, spendthrift, irrevocable. He said, "At midnight on your 18th birthday, Quinn, the assets your grandfather left you are legally yours. You have options. You can keep the current trust. You can dissolve it. Or you can move everything into a new structure you design. Today." I said, "What do you recommend?" He said, "A new irrevocable trust. Professional corporate trustee. I work with Midland Trust Services. You're the sole beneficiary. Distributions covered for education, housing, medical. Your mother, Mark Hollis, and Skylar Hollis are excluded as beneficiaries and trustees, permanently." I said, "Irrevocable means what?" He said, "Once you sign, not even you can undo it. That's the point. It protects you from outside pressure, including your own, in a weak moment." I thought about that. I thought about my mother's hand on my wrist, her smile, her closer to your birthday. I said, "Okay." He nodded. He looked down at his pad, then up. He said, "Quinn, before we go further, there's something I need to tell you about your mother's attorney." The plant in the corner was dying. The banker's lamp hummed. Outside, a UPS truck braked at the curb. I said, "Tell me." Caldwell folded his hands. He said, "Your mother has been working with a man named Lance Briggs. Briggs is a local estate attorney. He's been reprimanded twice by the state bar. He specializes in what my profession politely calls aggressive family planning." I said, "Meaning?" He said, "Meaning he'll draft documents most of us would walk away from." He opened a folder on his desk. He slid it halfway toward me. I could see the top page upside down. Everett Family Financial Unification Agreement. My full legal name in the subheader, Quinn Marie Everett. He said, "A paralegal at Briggs's firm left for a different practice 2 weeks ago. She sent us drafts she was concerned about. She wasn't the only one concerned." I said, "What does it do?" He said, "It would make you a co-trustee with your mother. It would grant her a durable financial power of attorney, and it would assign a significant portion of your beneficial interest to a holding company. Something called Hollis Everett Holdings LLC." He let me read. The signature line was dated February 28th, 2 months before my birthday, while I was still 17. I looked up. I said, "I'd still be a minor." He said, "Correct. Your mother's signature as your guardian would have been required alongside yours. That's their plan. Have you sign under maternal authority before the trust releases, while you still need her signature to breathe in the legal sense." I put the folder down carefully. My hands were steady. My hands surprised me. I said, 4 months. He said, "I'm sorry, Quinn. 4 months, that we know of. 4 months of me serving her coffee while she was building a cage." I said, "Let's build mine." I drove home from Lancaster at the speed limit with my hands at 10 and 2. I walked in at 5:30. My mother was at the stove, stirring something that smelled like her Sunday chicken pot pie, my favorite since I was 6. She turned. She smiled. She said, "How did the college meeting go?" I said, "Fine. Good, actually. She gave me some aid paperwork to look over." "Oh, that's wonderful. Come sit." I sat at the kitchen island. She set a plate in front of me without asking. 2 scoops of pot pie, a sprig of parsley, her church supper presentation. She said, "Quinny, I was thinking about your birthday." I kept my face clean. I said, "Oh yeah?" She said, "For your 18th, we should do something just family. A special breakfast. Just us. Pancakes. Your favorite." I said, "That sounds nice, Mom." She said, "And maybe we'll talk about some grown-up things. You're a woman now." Mark's voice drifted in from the living room, over the TV. He said, without turning his head, "Yeah, grown-up stuff." Skylar came into the kitchen. She took a plate. She said, "What grown-up stuff?" My mother said brightly, "Nothing, honey, just family planning." Skylar rolled her eyes. She said, "Sounds boring." My mother said, "It will be." I took a bite of pot pie. It tasted the way it always tasted. Butter, pepper, thyme, my childhood on a fork. I said, "Pancakes sound great, Mom." I even smiled. Caldwell had told me, "Don't change a thing. Not your face, not your schedule, not a word." I didn't. I was the quiet daughter she thought I was. I just happened to also be the daughter with a lawyer. We met twice more before my birthday. Always a cover story. A college tour. A financial aid appointment. A library research trip. Caldwell was patient. He had a way of talking about money that made it feel like plumbing. Not magic. Not morality. Just pipes and valves. We named the new trust together. He said, "Most people name trusts after themselves. What do you want to call it?" I said, "The Margaret Trust." He wrote it down. He didn't ask why. We built the thing piece by piece. Corporate trustee, Midland Trust Services, a Harrisburg-based firm with a clean 40-year record. Beneficiary, Quinn Marie Everett, and her direct biological descendants, if any, in perpetuity. Excluded forever from beneficiary or trustee status, Caroline Everett Hollis, Mark Hollis, Schuyler Hollis, and any entity in which any of the three held equity. Distributions authorized for tuition, reasonable housing, medical, emergency living expenses. Discretionary distributions subject to trustee review. Spendthrift clause. No creditors could attach. No one could pressure me into a lump sum withdrawal on anyone else's behalf. Irrevocable. No amendment. No termination. No reversal. Caldwell said, "You understand that this protects you from them. It also protects you from you. In a weak moment, 5 years from now, if your mother cries the right cries, you can't undo this. That's on purpose." I said, "I know." He said, "Good. Many 18-year-olds don't." I signed the draft in pencil. Twice. To practice. Then we set the live execution for 12 o'clock and 1 a.m. on April 15, 2026. My birthday. Notary ready. Trustee ready. Caldwell set a phone call for 9 a.m. sharp the morning after. On speaker, if I chose. He said, "It's your moment, Quinn. Use it how you need to." Aunt Beth called me the week after that meeting. Out of the blue. Or maybe not. She said, "Quinny, Pittsburgh speaking. You got a minute?" I stepped into the backyard. The air smelled like early grass. She said, "I heard from David Caldwell that you've been asking questions." I said, "He told you?" She said, "He told me you called. He didn't tell me what about, I can guess." Beth was my dad's little sister. ICU nurse. 48. She and my dad had been close. She and my mother had not. She said, "Quinn, I should have told you this years ago. I'm sorry. Your father tried to change his will before he died. 6 months before the accident. He wanted a trust set up for you, with my name as co-trustee." I sat down on the porch step. I said, "What happened?" She said, "Your mother happened. She cried for a week. She said it would kill her trust in him. She said it was a betrayal. He caved. He left everything to her. Life insurance, the house, everything." I said, 450,000. She said, "You knew." I said, "I found the paperwork last month." A long quiet. Then she said, "Honey, you are not the first one she worked on. You're just the one with a grandfather who planned ahead." I didn't cry. I wanted to. I didn't. She said, "If you need somewhere to go after your birthday, I have a room. I have a mean cat named Walter. I have coffee. You're welcome as long as you want." I said, "Aunt Beth, what day is it there?" She said, "Thursday, Peanut, same as you." I said, "I might take you up on the room." The Sunday before my birthday, my mother made pot roast. Her something big is coming meal. Mark lit candles. Schuyler put her phone face down. Over dinner, I floated a question. Casual, curious, the voice of a daughter looking for guidance. I said, "Mom, what's the difference between a trust and a family account anyway?" She lit up like a porch lamp. She said, "Oh, honey, trusts are complicated. They can fail if they're not managed by family who really cares." Mark nodded. "Lawyers drain them. Saw it happen to Gus Trainor's mom." My mother said, "You'd be shocked. Fees, delays, they nickel and dime you." I said, "Huh, that's scary." She said, "It's why family accounts work better. Shared goals, no strangers, just pooled." Mark said, "Family money stays with family hands, not some corporate trustee up in Harrisburg." It was the word corporate that gave him away. I'd never used that word in front of him. Neither had she. But Briggs would have. I said, "Huh. Skylar from her plate without looking up. Mom says the money was supposed to be all of ours anyway. Dead silence. My mother's fork froze half an inch above her plate. Mark said too loud, "Sky, honey, eat." My mother recovered. She said, "Sky just means family is a team, sweetheart. That's all." I said, "Oh, of course. Mom, this roast is amazing." I reached for the potatoes. I passed the gravy. I kept my face the face of the quiet daughter who didn't know anything. Inside my head, I was taking notes. Skylar had known, at least the shape of it, maybe the edges. My mother had told her enough to get her to behave on a certain morning in April. 4 days now. I was counting. 2 days before my birthday, my mother announced an early celebration dinner at Willow Creek Country Club. I hadn't agreed to it. 15 people, the pastor and his wife, Mark's business partner Ron, 2 neighbors, my mother's women's circle co-chair, Donna. Skylar in a pink dress, Mark in a navy blazer that strained across his shoulders. The club's private room had green wallpaper and a chandelier the size of a small car. The waiters wore white gloves that made me sad for their wrists. My mother stood up during dessert. She tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. She said, "I'd like to propose a toast to my brave girl. Who's going to make such smart decisions tomorrow?" 15 people lifted 15 glasses. I lifted mine. I smiled. I said, "Thank you, Mom." Mark caught my eye from across the table. He tipped his wine toward me. He mouthed, "Big day." I smiled back. 3 tables over, at a table for one, a man in a navy blazer was eating a Caesar salad, mid-50s, thinning hair, a ring with a stone too big for his finger, a leather briefcase leaning against his chair. He looked up. He looked at Mark. He gave a small professional nod. Mark nodded back. I didn't know the man's face yet, but I knew the briefcase. I knew the posture of a man who charged by the hour and expected his invoice paid in cash. Lance Briggs was already at my birthday dinner. 1 day early, waiting. Pastor Lowry raised his glass and said something kind about my late grandfather. I smiled and thanked him. Grandpa had said, "Your choice, your life." I raised my glass to the whole room. I drank the wine. April 15th, 2026. 11:47 p.m. My bedroom door was locked. My laptop was open. 3 sharpened pencils sat on my desk that I hadn't needed. I was wearing pajamas. Gray top, plaid pants, slippers. I wanted my signature to come from the version of me who slept in this house every night. At 11:52, Caldwell joined the Zoom. White hair, blue tie, green banker's lamp behind him. At 11:54, a woman from Midland Trust Services joined. Her name was Priya Desai. She said, "Happy almost birthday, Miss Everett." At 11:56, the online notary joined. Commissioned in Pennsylvania. Camera on. ID check completed. 11:59. Caldwell said, "Ready, Quinn?" I said, "Yes." 11:59:40, 11:59:55. The cursor blinked in the signature field. 12 o'clock in 1 second. I typed my legal name. Quinn Marie Everett. Slow. Each letter on purpose. The notary confirmed. Priya confirmed. Caldwell's eyes tracked the screen. At 12:02, the system requested confirmation of the asset transfer authorization. I clicked approve. 2-factor code. Approved. At 12:03, Priya said, "Initiating wire." At 12:04:22, she said, "Confirmed. Funds received, $681,412.90. The Margaret Trust is funded. Fully executed. Irrevocable." Caldwell looked into the camera. He said, "Happy birthday, Miss Everett. The world is yours now." I realized I'd been holding my breath for almost a minute. I let it out. I said, "Thank you." He said, "Sleep if you can. Expect me at 9 tomorrow." The 3 of them dropped off. The Zoom window went quiet. Downstairs in the dark house, a refrigerator hummed. I closed my laptop. I sat. My hands tingled. For the first time in 6 months, I was tired. I lay down and I slept. Let me pause here for a second. If somebody in your family has ever asked you to sign something you didn't fully understand, drop the word "rooted" in the comments. I want to know how many of us there are. I read every comment later tonight, I promise, because what comes next isn't the ending, Not even close. I still had to go downstairs the next morning. I still had to sit across from the woman who'd spent 4 months drafting papers about me, and she still thought she was going to win. Back to the story. 7:30 a.m., April 16th. I was awake before my alarm. I showered for 6 minutes. I dried my hair halfway. I put on a cashmere cardigan the color of early butter, jeans, my grandmother's gold stud earrings, no makeup. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. I said out loud, "Quiet, daughter." I looked like her. I went downstairs at 7:45. The kitchen smelled like pancakes. My mother was at the stove in her robe, pink, quilted, her blonde hair pinned back the way she wore it for brunch. She turned, she beamed. She said, "There's my birthday girl. Happy 18th, sweetheart." She wrapped me in a hug. It lasted 3 seconds longer than her hugs usually lasted. She smelled like her Estee Lauder and bacon grease. Mark was at the table in a polo. Skylar was in her pajamas with her phone propped against the orange juice pitcher. A manila folder sat on the table. To the right of my mother's place setting, not hidden, not even slightly. 3 pancakes in a tower on my plate. Candles, the thin birthday kind, unlit. My mother said, "Sit, sit, Mark, light her candles." Mark pulled a lighter from his pocket. He lit 3 candles. My mother said, "Make a wish, Quinny." I leaned over the plate. I thought, I wish for my grandfather to know. I blew the candles out. My mother clapped. Skylar said, "Yay, Quinn." Mark said, 18 years old. Christ. I said, "Smells great, Mom." I took my fork. I cut into the top pancake. The folder caught the morning light. The edge of it lined up perfectly with my mother's coffee mug. I'd rehearsed this morning in my head 50 times, maybe. None of them prepared me for how normal it felt. She let me eat 2 bites of pancake. Then she folded her hands on the table. She used her warm voice, the women's circle voice. She said, "Honey, now that you're 18, there's something we need to talk about. That money. From Grandpa." I set my fork down. I said, "Okay." She slid the folder across the table. It moved 3 inches. It came to rest against my plate. She said, "It's nothing big. Just some family paperwork Mark's attorney drew up, to help us all be smart, for the family." Mark said, "Nothing crazy, just structure." Skylar watched. She had not picked up her phone. I said, "May I look?" My mother said, "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." I opened the folder. The cover page said, "Everett Family Financial Unification Agreement. Quinn Marie Everett, Principal." Beneath it, smaller, "Caroline Everett Hollis, Successor Co-Trustee. Mark J. Hollis, Attorney-in-Fact." My full legal name in 3 places, a signature line with my name printed below it. Another line for my mother's signature as parent or guardian, which she'd only need if I were still a minor. I flipped past the cover. Page 2. Durable Financial Power of Attorney, granted to Caroline Everett Hollis. Page 5. Assignment of partial beneficial interest to Hollis Everett Holdings, LLC. Page 7. Co-trusteeship designation. Page 9. Acknowledgement of family financial priorities, including tuition assistance for Skylar Ann Hollis. My blood ran cold. I was looking at proof. I kept my face even. I turned to the footer on page 1. Generated December 14th, 2025. 4 months ago. My mother said, still smiling, "It's simpler than it looks. Just a few signatures, and we can get on with your birthday." I said, "I'd like to read it first." I read every page, not skimming, reading. I turned each sheet with both hands. I followed every paragraph with my index finger. I mouthed the harder words. At the 2-minute mark, my mother's cheerful smile began to crack at the corners. At the 4-minute mark, she tapped her coffee mug. Twice. Quick. At 5 minutes, Mark said, "Quinn, sweetheart, you don't need to read every line." I said, "I like to understand what I'm signing." Mark said, "It's just structure. My guy's on standby to notarize this morning." I said, "Mark, you just said my guy." He said, "What?" I said, "A minute ago you said Mark's attorney. Now it's my guy." A silence. Skylar's phone still sat face down. She hadn't touched it. I turned to page 5. I tapped the paragraph. I said, Mom, this line says, partial beneficial interest is assigned to Hollis Everett Holdings LLC. What is Hollis Everett Holdings? My mother blinked. She said, Oh, a family entity. For tax purposes. It's not really a thing. I said, When was it formed? She said, I don't remember exactly. Mark cut in. Quinn, stop, it's just paperwork. Sign the stickied pages, eat your pancakes. I looked at him, calm, steady. I said, Mark, how long have you known Lance Briggs? The name landed. Mark's jaw did something, slight, but I saw it. My mother said too quickly, Sweetheart, we haven't even told you the attorney's name yet. I said, I know. That's what I'm noticing. Skylar looked up, finally, wide-eyed. Mark said, Quinn. I said, One more second. I want to check the footer on the last page. I turned to page 11. The footer said, Generated, December 14th, 2025. Briggs & Associates, document V 4.3. 4 months, 4 versions. I closed the folder. Carefully. I said, Mom, this document was generated 4 months ago. She said, Honey, lawyers keep old templates. I said, Templates don't put a person's middle name in them. I flipped back to page 1. I pointed at my middle name, Quinn Marie Everett. I said, This is mine. This is only mine. 4 months ago. My mother's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She said, We've been planning for your future for months, that's all. That's just good parenting, sweetheart. Mark said, Quinn, sign the pages. His voice was not warm anymore. I said, Mark, your lawyer's name is on the letterhead. Briggs & Associates, Lancaster. I passed your lawyer at the country club on Monday night. Navy blazer, Caesar salad. Skylar breathed in fast, not out. Mark said, Quinn, don't get cute. I said, I'm not being cute, I'm reading. My mother tried again, softer, the wounded voice. She said, Quinny, honey, this is for your protection. You don't understand how taxes work. You don't understand what happens when someone your age inherits a lot of money. There are sharks out there. I said, Mom, I didn't say no. I said I want to understand. She said, There's nothing to understand. It's family. Sign. I said, Before I sign anything, I'd like to have our family attorney on the line, just to explain it to me. I said the word our, gently. That was the word that broke her face. Her smile locked, her eyes flicked. Fast. Panic. She said, We don't need Caldwell for this. My guy can walk you through it just fine. I waited. I let the silence work. I said, Mom? I said, I never told you who our family attorney was. The kitchen went quiet the way kitchens do when the refrigerator kicks off and nobody's spoken in a minute. I watched my mother's mouth. She opened it, closed it, opened it. She said, Quinny, Grandpa mentioned him, years ago, I must have remembered. I said, Grandpa died 18 months ago. I've never said his name in this house. Mark said, Quinn, stop. Skylar quietly from her chair. Wait, who's Caldwell? Mark snapped. Sky, not now. Skylar shrank back. My mother tried to grip the table edge. Her knuckles were white. She said, I asked around, when Grandpa died, about his estate, that's all. It's nothing sinister. I said, Mom, when did you ask around? She didn't answer. I said, Was it around the time you and Mark started meeting with Lance Briggs? She said, Quinn, please. Mark said, You little... He caught himself. His face was red. A vein pulsed at his temple. He said, You think you're slick? You think you know what's best? I said, I don't think I'm slick, Mark. I think I've been quiet for a long time, and people mistook that for a different thing. Skylar, very small. Mom, what is happening? My mother said, Nothing is happening, honey. Quinn is being difficult. I said, I'm being careful. My phone, lying face up beside my plate, vibrated. The three of them looked at it. The screen lit up. The name on the screen said David Caldwell, Esquire. The time on the screen said 9:03 a.m. My mother's face lost the last of its color. I picked up the phone. I looked at her. I looked at Mark. I looked at Skylar. I said, "Do you mind if I put him on speaker?" Mark half stood. He said, "Don't answer that." I said, "I think I will." My mother said, Quinny, wait." Mark said louder, "Quinn, sit down." I was already sitting down. I said so. I said, "I am sitting down, Mark." I looked at him the way I'd looked at ice on the driveway every January of my life, carefully, without sentiment. I said, "He's our family attorney. He represented Grandpa for 30 years. He's called to wish me a happy birthday. I think he has a right to be heard in this house." My mother said, "This is a private family matter, Quinn." I said, "You invited a whole country club to hear your toast 2 nights ago, Mom." She had no answer for that. I hit the green button. I hit the speaker icon. I set the phone on the table, face up, between the folder and the maple syrup. I said, "Mr. Caldwell, you're on speaker. I'm at the kitchen table with my mother, Mark Hollis, and my sister Skylar." His voice filled the kitchen, calm, low. The voice of a man who had done this exact thing in many kitchens before and knew exactly how to do it in mine. He said, "Good morning, Quinn. Happy birthday. I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast." I said, "You're not. We were just starting a conversation about money." He said, "I see. Good timing then." Skylar was staring at the phone. Mark was staring at my mother. My mother was staring at the manila folder as if it had bitten her. Caldwell said, "I wanted to formally confirm something with you, Quinn, for the record." He paused. I could hear a page turn in his office 400 miles from nothing. He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yes." Caldwell said, clearly and without hurry, "I'm calling to confirm that the asset transfer we discussed completed successfully at 12:04 a.m. last night. The Margaret Trust is fully funded. The trustee is Midland Trust Services. The transaction is legally irrevocable." The sound that happened in the kitchen wasn't a sound. It was the opposite of sound. My mother's fork dropped onto her plate. A small, clean clink. Mark's hands, which had been flat on the table, curled into fists. Skylar said, "What?" Caldwell went on warmly, as if he hadn't just set a house on fire. "Total funded amount, $681,412.90. Trustee fees quoted at 0.6% annually. Your first distribution request for fall tuition at Penn State is pre-approved. Everything is in order." Mark said, "What trust?" His voice came out strangled. Caldwell said, "The Margaret Trust, Mr. Hollis. Named, I believe, for Quinn's late grandmother. Established last night." My mother said, "That's... Quinn, you didn't..." I said, "Mom, I did." Skylar said, "What does that mean?" Caldwell said, "It means, Skylar, is it? That the funds your grandparents left to Quinn are now held by a corporate trustee. They can only be used for Quinn's benefit. They cannot be accessed by anyone else. Ever." Mark stood all the way up. He said, This is, Caldwell said pleasantly. "Mr. Hollis, please don't finish that sentence. You'll want to be careful about what's said on an open line." Mark didn't sit down. He also didn't keep talking. I watched my mother's face go through 4 expressions in 3 seconds. Disbelief, calculation, fear. And finally, slowly, the expression I'd been waiting 18 years to see on her. The expression that said, "I have lost." Caldwell said, as if he were reading the weather, "Incidentally, Quinn, I wanted to flag something else while we're all together." I said, "Go ahead." He said, "About 10 weeks ago, my office received a forwarded copy of a draft document package originating from Briggs & Associates in Lancaster. A former paralegal there raised concerns about the content and forwarded it to 2 colleagues. Standard whistleblower channel." My mother said, That's protected material." Caldwell said gently, "Ma'am, work product prepared for a third-party minor beneficiary is not privileged in the way you seem to be thinking, and the forwarding isn't the issue. The content is." Mark said, "You can't." Caldwell said, "I can, Mr. Hollis. I've been doing this a long time." He let that sit. I watched my mother's hands shake, just her hands. Her face was frozen. Caldwell went on. "The document is titled Everett Family Financial Unification Agreement. It's addressed to my client Quinn, with a signature line dated February 28th of this year. That date was 2 months before Quinn's 18th birthday, while she was still, legally, a minor in Pennsylvania. He paused. Quinn, can you describe what you're holding? I said. A manila folder. Inside, a document called Everett Family Financial Unification Agreement, 12 pages, generated December 14th, 2025. Letterhead, Briggs & Associates, version 4.3. Caldwell said, Yes, that is the document. Schuyler whispered, Oh my God. Mark said, This is a setup. Caldwell said, No, Mr. Hollis. A setup requires deception by the party being accused. Ms. Everett has simply read what was placed in front of her, with witnesses. My mother said, very small, Quinn, honey, please. I said, Mom, let him finish. Caldwell said, I'd like to be clear about a few things, for Quinn's protection and for the record of this conversation. He numbered them, out loud. 1. The document in front of Quinn is not enforceable. After midnight last night, the assets it attempts to direct are no longer legally available to Quinn to assign. They belong to the Margaret Trust. 2. The document was intended to be executed while Quinn was still a minor. The signature line was dated February 28th. Execution would have required Caroline Everett Hollis's signature as guardian. That is a structural indicator of intent to use parental authority to direct a minor's future inheritance. 3. In Pennsylvania, a guardian owes a fiduciary duty to a minor child. Attempting to divert a minor's inheritance into an entity in which the guardian has personal financial interest, such as Hollis Everett Holdings LLC, formed November of 2025, Mark Hollis sole member, is a fiduciary breach. My mother said, Stop, please stop. Caldwell said, 4. I have, as of yesterday, filed a formal complaint with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board regarding Lance Briggs's role in preparing this document, along with 3 previous drafts. Mr. Briggs has 2 prior reprimands. Mark said, You filed? On Briggs. Caldwell said, I filed on Monday. Mr. Briggs was notified yesterday at 4 p.m. I expect he's not answering calls today. The manila folder on the table looked different now, smaller, sadder, dead paper. I said, Mom, look at me. Her eyes came up, slow, red. I said, Did you know what he was drafting? She said, Quinn? I said, Yes or no. She said, Yes, I knew. Schuyler made a sound I'd never heard her make. Mark slammed his palm flat on the table. The salt shaker jumped. Schuyler jumped. He said, You did all this behind our backs? I looked at him. I said, Mark. I said it the way you'd say it to a dog in a kitchen. I said, I did it in front of a licensed attorney, at 12:01 a.m., on my 18th birthday, under full legal capacity. I said, You did yours behind my back, for 4 months, while I was still 17. His face was purple. A vein at his temple stood up. He said, We raised you. I said, Mark, you moved in when I was 12. What you raised was Schuyler's brand, not me. My mother flinched. Schuyler made a small noise. Mark said, You ungrateful. Caldwell, from the speaker, cut in. Calm, blade calm. Mr. Hollis, I'd advise you to take a breath. This conversation is being documented on my end, for my client's protection. Mark stopped. He sat back down, hard. He stared at the wall. I said, Mr. Caldwell, thank you. He said, You're welcome, Quinn. I said, One more thing. Could I read something out loud, for the record? He said, Please. I opened the folder. I found page 9. I read, Acknowledgement of Family Financial Priorities, including tuition assistance for Schuyler Ann Hollis at Bucknell University. I looked up. At Schuyler. At my mother. At Mark. I said, So the whole thing was to pay for Schuyler's school. Nobody said no. Nobody said yes either. I closed the folder. I said, I'll be keeping this. My attorney has asked for a copy. My mother said, Quinn? I said, Mom, not right now. I don't have anything cruel to say. But I don't have anything kind either. My mother's tears started. On cue. On volume. Real tears, I'd give her that. Her body could produce them. But the script underneath them was one I'd heard 100 times before, at 100 dinner tables. She said, "After everything I've sacrificed for you, Quinn, this is how you repay me?" I waited for the wave to pass. I said, "Mom, I've been thinking about the word sacrifice for a long time. I'd like to come back to it with you when we're both calmer, with professionals in the room, a mediator, a counselor, someone neutral." She said, "I don't need a stranger to tell me how to be your mother." I said, "I think we do. I think we've needed one for a long time." She cried harder. Mark put his hand on her shoulder, for show. He didn't look at her. Caldwell, still on speaker, said, "Quinn, Elizabeth Everett is parked at the end of your driveway. She called me 10 minutes ago. You are welcome to leave whenever you're ready." I stood up. I picked up the folder. I picked up my phone. I said, "Thank you for breakfast, Mom." I walked to the coat rack. I put on my jacket. I stepped into my sneakers. I walked down the hallway past the wedding photos on the wall. At the front door, I paused. I turned. Skylar was watching me. Just her. My mother had her face in her hands. Mark was staring at his coffee. I said, "Sky, you're 16. You didn't do this. Don't carry it. Text me in a year." Skylar nodded. Once. I opened the door. The April sun was pale and honest. I walked down the driveway. Aunt Beth's Honda Civic was waiting with the engine running. "Pause with me again. If you just unclenched your jaw, tap that like button. It helps more than you know." I thought walking out that door was the ending. It wasn't. It was maybe chapter 10 of 15. I didn't know yet how small towns decide who the villain is, how fast, how quietly. And the phone calls that were about to hit my voicemail from people I hadn't spoken to in years. My mother wasn't done. Mark wasn't done. Willow Creek had opinions too. Stay with me. The next part surprised even me. Aunt Beth lived in a second-floor apartment on Maple Street in Squirrel Hill. She had a fiddle-leaf fig that was taller than me, a gray cat named Walter who judged everyone, a sectional couch with a quilt thrown over it, a coffee table with a water ring I instantly loved. She said, "Shoes off. Tea. Now." I said, "Beth." She said, "Shoes, tea, shower, sleep, in that order. Adult talk in 12 hours. I did what she said. I showered for 20 minutes. I came out in sweats. My phone was face down on the counter. I turned it over. 47 missed calls. 62 texts. My mother, my mother, my mother. Pastor Lowry. Donna from Women's Circle. My aunt on my mother's side. Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. A neighbor named Phil. I scrolled. "Quinny, please call me." "Quinn, your mother is devastated. This is Pastor Lowry. I'd like to speak with you when you're ready. You are breaking your mother's heart. Call me back right now, young lady." Beth appeared in the doorway with a mug of Earl Grey. She looked over my shoulder at the screen. She said, "Block them." I said, "All of them?" She said, "All of them. Caldwell will tell you which ones to unblock later. Tonight, your job is to sleep." I said, "She'll say I abandoned her." Beth said, "She'll say what she'll say. The truth has to get its shoes on. The truth is slow, Peanut. Let it walk." I blocked 12 numbers. I put my phone on airplane mode. I drank the tea. Walter jumped up onto the couch. He looked at me. He sighed. He curled up on the quilt like he'd decided. I slept for 10 hours. I hadn't slept like that since I was 9. Willow Creek was a town of 9,000 people, 3 churches, and 2 opinions on everything. My mother went to First Methodist the Sunday after. She wore navy. She cried during the announcements. She stood up during prayer concerns and said her daughter had left home, unexpectedly, in a moment of confusion. Pastor Lowry's wife, Mary, sat 3 rows back. Mary had been at the country club toast on Monday night. Mary had heard Mark mouth "big day." Mary had heard my mother say such smart decisions tomorrow. Mary did not cry during Caroline's prayer concern. Mary did not come over afterward for a hug. Mary went home and called Donna from Women's Circle. 3 days later, Pastor Lowry pulled my mother aside after service. He used a kind voice. He said maybe the circle needed her to take a step back, to focus on her family, to do some reflection. My mother said, "After everything I've given this church," Pastor Lowry said. "I know, Caroline, I know." At Skylar's school, kids on the swim team had already seen a screenshot, not of the documents, of something simpler. An article one of them shared in group chat. Headline: 30 times parents' favoritism of one child came back to bite them. Somebody added a crying laughing emoji. Somebody else added a photo of Skylar's mom at the last bake sale. Skylar was not the villain at school, but her mother was. The swim team captain, a junior named Izzy, sat with Skylar at lunch on Wednesday and said, "That was messed up. What they tried. You okay?" Skylar said, "I didn't know." Izzy said, "Yeah, I believe you." That was, in Willow Creek, a verdict. I didn't tweet anything. I didn't post. I didn't have to. Mark's business was held together with prayer and invoicing tricks. It had been for 18 months. The morning after the breakfast, First Keystone Bank called on a past-due equipment lien. Mark had been paying the minimum. He'd been planning to catch up with the new family capital, his own phrase, spoken to his business partner Ron over beers in January. First Keystone was not interested in family capital. First Keystone wanted $6,400 by Friday. Friday came. The $6,000 did not. They called liens on the F350 and 2 of his concrete mixers. On Monday, the tow truck came to the shop off Route 272. Mark watched his truck go up the ramp. He did not cry. He also did not come home. My mother had co-signed the second mortgage on the house. Her name was on the paper. Her name was on the hook. On Tuesday, she called a divorce attorney. Not Briggs. Briggs was, by that point, no longer taking calls. A different one. Someone named Cartwright. She filed for legal separation of their finances on Thursday. Skylar's Bucknell deposit was non-refundable. $2,000. Gone. She emailed the admissions office, crying. They were kind. They issued a waiver and a gentle form letter about deferring a year. Skylar enrolled at Penn State Harrisburg instead. In-state tuition. 86% cheaper. On a Saturday in May, Mark moved out of the Willow Creek house. He rented a room above a garage in Ephrata. My mother kept the house. Technically, the second mortgage kept most of it, on paper. None of this was my doing. I'd simply declined to be the life raft. They'd spent 6 months trying to pool my money into family money. Now they couldn't even agree on whose debts were whose. Caldwell's complaint against Lance Briggs went to the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board in late April. The board is slow, usually. This one moved. Briggs's paralegal, the one who'd forwarded the drafts, gave a sworn statement. 2 other former clients came forward, a widow in Lidditz whose late husband's assets had been restructured suspiciously, and a retired schoolteacher whose grandchildren's educational trust had disappeared into a family LLC controlled by her son-in-law. Pattern, the board called it. A disciplinary word. 8 weeks after Caldwell's filing, the board issued a ruling. Lance Briggs was suspended from the practice of law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for 3 years. Upon reinstatement, he'd be subject to supervisory probation for an additional 2. He couldn't touch a trust document. He couldn't advise on an estate. He couldn't even, technically, draft a simple will. The local paper ran a small item on page 3. 2 paragraphs. His photo, his firm's address. It was the kind of item that does not make the front page but is read, quietly, by every attorney within 50 miles, and by every past client he'd ever had. Caldwell forwarded the article to me by email. The email had no subject line and no body, just the link. I wrote back, "Thank you." He replied 3 minutes later. 3 words. "Justice isn't loud." I saved the email. I still have it. I saved it because it said something I wanted to remember. You don't have to yell to win. You don't have to tear anyone down. You file the paperwork. You let the system do what it was built to do. You let the truth walk slowly toward daylight. And you let the people who hurt you watch their own ceilings come down, brick by brick, without your help. Skylar texted me on a Tuesday in late May. I was in Squirrel Hill. I was at the kitchen table, writing my application essay for the Schreier Honors College. Her text said, "I didn't know she wanted all of it. I thought it was just some. For my tuition. I didn't ask her to, I swear. I read it 3 times. I did not write back immediately. Beth walked past, saw my face, said, "Skylar?" I nodded. Beth said, "Take your time, or don't. Either's fine." I took 3 days. On Friday evening, I wrote back. "Sky, I know. She told you what she needed you to believe. The planning was hers, not yours. You're 16, you were in the kitchen, not behind the papers." 3 dots. Dots for a long time. She wrote, "I'm sorry." I wrote, "I know." Then I wrote, "I'm not angry with you. I'm not available to be around Mom for a while, but I'm not cutting you off." She wrote, "Okay." I wrote, "Coffee in a year, when you're 18 and on your own. I mean it. I'll drive." She wrote, "Okay, Quinny." She hadn't called me Quinny in 3 years, not since Grandpa died. I set the phone down on the table. I looked out at the fiddle-leaf fig. Beth came into the room. She sat across from me. She had a mug in each hand. She pushed one toward me. She said, "How's the kid?" I said, "Scared, lonely. She'll be okay." Beth said, "You're not responsible for her being okay." I said, "I know, but I can hold a door open." Beth tapped her mug against mine. Earl Grey against Earl Grey. She said, "Your dad would have liked that, holding a door open." I said, "Yeah, I think he would." August came. I got my Penn State packet, roommate assignment, floor plan, meal plan brochure, a bulleted list of what to bring. Beth and I packed her Civic on a Saturday morning. The trunk first, then the back seat, a quilt, a bag of books, a desk lamp that had belonged to Grandpa, the cedar box in a padded case. The letter from Grandpa was in the glove compartment, folded, softened now from being held. Beth drove. 200 miles. We listened to Linda Ronstadt. We stopped at a roadside place for grilled cheese. State College was warm and green. Dorm smelled like new paint and popcorn. My roommate was named Maya. Dominican-American from Philadelphia, loud laugh, sunflower bedsheets. Maya hugged me within a minute of meeting me. She said, "You're gonna love this floor. Our RA brings donuts." I said, "I'm Quinn. I'm from Lancaster County." She said, "I'm Maya. I don't talk to my mom either. Solidarity." I laughed. Out loud. Actually loud. Beth caught my eye from across the room and smiled. We unpacked. We made my bed. We hung Grandpa's lamp on the desk. Beth took me to dinner at an Italian place. She paid. She said, "The Margaret Trust is paying, technically, but I want the receipt." I said, "Beth." She said, "Quinn, you did not cost me anything. You gave me back someone who looks like my brother around the eyes. I'm the one who owes." I cried a little. Then I ate my pasta. When she dropped me back at the dorm, she put her hand on my cheek. She said, "He'd be proud of you. He said he would be, standing in my kitchen 4 years ago." She drove away. I did not look back toward the house on Maple Street. I looked forward. September was a blur. I took an intro to philosophy class and an intro to constitutional law class and a math class I would quietly drop in week 4. Maya and I figured out a grocery rhythm, a laundry rhythm. Which dining hall had the better salad bar? I joined a pre-law club. I sat at a long table with 8 other freshmen who all talked too fast about contracts and wanted to be Supreme Court clerks. I didn't talk too fast. I listened. 3 of them became actual friends. My mother didn't call for the first 2 months. The first text came on October 12th. It said, "Are you safe?" No punctuation. No question mark. I read it twice. I didn't answer. The second came 2 weeks later. It said, "I miss you." I didn't answer that one either. Beth called me every Sunday. We talked about Walter the cat, about Beth's rotation schedule, about what I was reading, about what my classes were teaching me that my family had not. One Sunday in November, Beth said, "How's your heart, Peanut?" I said, "It's quiet." She said, "Good quiet or bad quiet?" I thought about it. I said, "Good quiet, the kind I didn't know existed." She said, "That's peace, honey." I said, "Peace." I sat with that word for a while. I'd spent my whole childhood being quiet because emotions were expensive, because noise was dangerous, because laughing too hard was an invoice my mother would eventually collect on. In my dorm room, with Maya humming in the shower and snow beginning to hit the window, I understood, for the first time, that quiet could also just mean quiet. No threat, no penalty, just the sound of a life I was finally allowed to have. April 15th, 2027. Paterno Library, 4th floor, window seat. The desk I liked best, by the radiator, with a view of the quad under a light dusting of late snow. I had an organic chemistry exam in the morning. I had closed my book. I had closed my notes. At 11:58 p.m., I opened my laptop. I logged into Midland Trust Services, quarterly statement, April 1st to April 15th, the Margaret Trust. Value, $729,448 and change. Up 7.2% year over year. Distributions issued, tuition, housing, fall books, a small grant for winter clothing. Next disbursement scheduled, fall tuition, August. I scrolled down to the footer of the statement. My grandparents' names were there in small italics. Harold and Margaret Everett. Originators of Corpus. I put my fingertips on the screen, briefly, over their names. At 12:01 a.m., exactly 1 year from the moment I had signed my name in a locked bedroom in Willow Creek, I closed my laptop. I sat in the window light for a minute. Outside, snow was falling so slowly it looked stopped. I thought about Grandpa and his 6 words, your choice, your life. I thought about my mother. I hoped, actually, that she was okay. Not in a gushy way. The way you hope a stranger on the news is okay. I thought about Skylar and the text she had sent me that morning, a photo of her first dorm room at Penn State Harrisburg, taken 2 weeks after her own 18th birthday. She'd written, "Coffee in May?" I had written back, "Yes, I'll drive." I gathered my things. I walked to the elevator. I rode down alone. Outside, in the cold, clear April night, I tilted my face up to the snow. I breathed out. I went home. If you made it this far, thank you. I know that wasn't easy to listen to. I know some of you heard yourselves in it. Drop one word in the comments, just one. What would you have done at 12:01 a.m.? Signed, waited, walked? I read every comment. I answer the ones I can. If you want to hear the next story, about the aunt who waited 10 years to tell me what actually happened the night my father changed his will, it's linked in the description. Right below this video. You're not dramatic. You're paying attention. See you there.